conscientious.
Yeah, he is. So we're going to start there, Pat. Good evening. As a preliminary matter, this is Adam Burney, Land Use Director. I'll do a roll call to confirm that all members are present and can hear me. I'm going to go in the order I can see you on the screen. Matthew Allison.
Here.
Paula Bertram.
Here.
Tanner Cole.
Here.
Okay, good evening. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel, and this meeting of the Planning Board is being conducted remotely. The town of Lunenburg, in response to the COVID-19 coronavirus, is following the guidance of the Lunenburg Board of Health, Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and the CDC regarding the virus and steps to prevent the spread. And all town facilities are currently closed, or actually, all town facilities are now open to the public in accordance with the exception of public meetings. In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general laws, chapter 30A, section 20, all public meetings are being conducted remote. The order, which you can find posted on the town website on the Team Information Center page, access to the town manager's webpage allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded, so the public can follow the deliberations of this meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the planning is convening by Zoom video conference, as posted on the town's website, is how the public may join. With a tablet or computer internet-enabled device, use the Zoom application or go to zoom.us in your browser and enter the meeting ID, or you can call 888-475-4499, again, 888-475-4499. The meeting ID for this meeting is 848-948-36008. That number again, 848-948-36008. Please note this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. And please remember, anything you broadcast will be captured by the recording and put out there for everyone to see in perpetuity, as these meetings are posted on YouTube. With that, I will pass this over to the chair, Mr. Allison.
Excellent, thank you. I noticed that Mr. Brenner has joined us, so we have 4 members. So we have called to order. Our second order of business is a public comment. So if there's any public comment not related to the 3 public hearings that we have tonight, I welcome it.
Mr. Bittner has his hand up.
Yes, please, Ms. Bittner.
Hi, Mr. Chair. Thank you for recognizing me. I just had some procedural questions. It is in regard to 101 Pleasant Street, but I was wondering if I could get those out of the way prior to getting into the weeds of the waiver requests. I just wanted to make that request before you started that public hearing.
You want to make a request about procedure?
No, I have some questions about procedure, so I'd like to ask those prior to starting the waiver requests. I know you usually have public comment at the end, but in regards to the last meeting, I had some just procedural questions.
Okay, I will try to remember to recognize you before we get too far into that. Does that sound good?
Thank you. Yep.
Okay, is there any other public comment?
Hi, Dave Mackey here.
Hello, Mr. Mackey.
I was just wondering if we'd have time. It looked like in section 7 that you were planning to cover the town meeting, and if there'd be time to talk about Article 28 in the proposal I made there.
Sure. Yeah, we have public comment at the beginning and at the end. And if you feel strongly about something, if you raise your hand during that discussion, I will gladly recognize you again to speak. Also, I'm sorry, I didn't get Mr. Bittner's address.
32 Sandy Cove Road.
Okay, and I'm sorry, Mr. Mackey, what was your address?
384 Townsend Harbor Road.
Very good. Thank you. I'm just helping out Marjorie. She does our minutes. Okay, so I have two people to look for when we get to future items on the agenda. Is there any other public comment?
No hands that I can see.
I don't see any either. So we'll get right into it. Our first appointment is 84 Lakefront Ave, Embers Pizzeria, request for waiver for site plan approval. Do we have somebody to speak to that?
Yes, we do. James Exaris. I'm the owner of the property located at that facility.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So, do you want to give us an overview of what you're asking for, or what you're doing?
Yes, thank you for taking the time to listen to us. What we're attempting to accomplish, we filed with the zoning board and were received favorably. So we had asked to add a second floor area within the footprint of the building because we have some concerns and some restrictions with the new CDC regulations regarding social distancing and occupant load. So in order to protect our customers as well as our workers, we're asking to increase the square footage of the building, and we're trying to remain within the footprint so that we do not encroach on any side or front setbacks or create any more hardship to the abutters. But yet we'll still be able to accommodate the occupant load that was intended to be there while providing a safe environment.
Wow. So you want to add a whole second floor?
Yes, that's what our proposal would be, is to add a second floor above the first floor. We currently have an occupant load of 98 people under our current permit, but obviously under the new restrictions, it would be impossible to even accomplish or achieve half of that, given the social distance requirements. So what we would propose to do is space things out the way they should be spaced out for the CDC while not increasing any occupant load and not overloading the existing parking facility. And so we can satisfy the requirements of all the agencies under the new normal guidelines and the new normal for eateries and establishments, and create a business that can still sustain based on what it needs to do for its employees and its occupants.
Okay. Well, I mean, to start off and be perfectly frank, you have 0 parking. So doubling the square footage doesn't, and I understand the current circumstances, and they're extremely unfortunate for everyone involved, which means everyone. But I'm kind of speechless. I don't know. I guess I'll open it up to the board. I'll get some input from hopefully anybody who has any.
I realize this is a different situation, Mr. Chairman, in the parking. However, there is parking in front of the building as well as off-street parking for Lakeview Ave and Lakefront Ave, and that parking has been historically utilized by the businesses. And I am assuming when Mr. Exaris talks about parking, he's talking about the parking that's used off-street currently. And this proposal, I did read the decision of the Zoning Board of Appeals as well as the applicant's packet. And the proposed addition does not increase the proposed number of occupancy of the building. It just changes the spacing requirement. So in my mind, at least, it shouldn't increase the parking requirements. But curious to see what other members say.
Thank you. Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, I had the same thought as Mrs. Bertram. My only concern, and this is where I don't know how things would transition. I understand the current owner would not be looking to increase the occupancy, but my kind of question for the rest of the board is what happens when, let's say, I mean, even if it's years from now, Embers is sold or closes, it's under new ownership, and they decide to increase. at this square footage, could they then increase the occupancy load, and would that then potentially be a parking issue, or is there a way, is that kind of capped by this process?
That's a very good question, and that was part of my concern.
Can we issue a waiver contingent upon with conditions?
You have conditioned waivers in the past.
So I don't see why we couldn't condition it to with a maximum occupancy. You know, and then if they wanted to come back for a change in that, I would assume that they'd have to come back to this body, correct?
Yes.
Well, I completely concur with everything that's been said about this, as far as the waiver and conditioning it. My concern is that waivers and stipulations and requirements over the years and through changes of ownership get disregarded and ignored and not followed up on. So I don't know if there's any kind of a mechanism to ensure that doesn't happen. This is kind of precedent because of the certain current circumstances. I don't know if we can require them to double their size and still retain the current occupancy rating. Is that a possibility? I don't know if that's beyond us. I think it might be.
The occupancy rating is beyond you because that's done through building code.
Exactly.
As of the last town meeting, the parking is now based on number of seats. So you can't require them to limit the building's occupancy because, again, that's done by a formula through the building code. But you can say that this waiver would be contingent on them not having more than X number of seats.
Mr. Chair, if it satisfies the board's need, we would agree to a deed restriction that we would record that would limit us to the 98 person capacity that we currently have. And we would record that on the deed, and that could never be overridden.
Wow. I very much appreciate that. Mr. Bernie, is that something that we can accommodate?
If he's offering it, then you can always accommodate it. And you would just memorialize it as a condition, and then he would submit proof of that prior to his certificate of occupancy.
It is not our intention to overload that property. It's our intention to get social spacing, and we stand behind our representation, and we will offer that deed restriction.
Oh, sure. There's no question about your intentions. I'm just looking into the future. If it potentially changes hands, I mean, I've lived in town for almost 50 years, and things certainly have changed quite a bit, and not under the most strict of regulation. But so we can accept his offer and then make that a stipulation in the approval?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No, go ahead.
Thank you. My thought is this is not a change of use. We have issued waivers for site plan approval in the past when it's not a proposed change of use, and this is not an enlargement of the footprint. I will say that if it were an enlargement of the footprint, I would feel differently. But this is simply the addition of a second floor for an existing use, and the property owner is willing to record a deed restriction limiting the occupancy of the building. So personally, I would have no problem granting this waiver from site plan approval.
Okay. Mr. Brenner, do you still feel the same?
Yeah, I very much agree that with that deed restriction, I'm very comfortable with this.
Okay. Mr. Cole, have you got anything to add to this?
Well, I guess my question is, in the request for waiver, there's some calculations that were performed relative to the parking. And are those based on our updated bylaw that was just passed at town meeting? And how does this stack up? And I'd like to have a good understanding of what we're waiving. And on the plan that's provided, there are no parking spaces shown on the plan. It just shows the footprint of the building on the lot and references the fact that the building is 0.2 feet off of the street line and there's a patio. So just looking at the plan, my understanding is that technically they don't own any parking spaces. So I'd like to have a good understanding of what they own, what they don't own, and like what the current parking arrangement is. So we have a clear understanding of what in fact it is that we're waiving.
So, go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Well, my understanding is that we're waiving site plan approval for a non-change of use, and it's simply an expansion of the square footage with no expansion, no change in footprint to an currently non-conforming existing business that, in my recollection, has been the Black Horse, and I think it might have been Skee Ball before that. I'm not quite sure, but
I read scooters.
So this building has been there longer than I have, and
no, and I understand where you're coming from. If we didn't approve a waiver and they went through site plan approval, then obviously it'd get reviewed by the engineer, our review engineer, and there would be parking calculations done as part of that. And so I just like to have a good understanding of kind of where we're at and what it is that we're waiving. And, I completely understand where the restaurant industry is, and I by no means want to apply any more hardship to them. I just like to have a clear understanding of what it is that we are in fact waiving.
The calculations, as they read in the submitted packet, are using the old bylaw. So with 20 tables, I guess I would ask Mr. Xeris, how many seats are at those tables?
The current tables are 4 person per table.
Okay, so there's 80 seats plus 12 bar seats.
Yes, sir.
So that's 92 seats.
Yes, sir.
So 92 divided by 3 is 30 points. So it'd be 31 spaces plus a maximum of 6 employees. So that would be 37 spaces based on the newly approved calculations. So it would up the required spaces by 8 spaces. But if you're looking at there being 40 public spaces within walking distance, you end up in a similar spot where you have adequate public spaces located within however many feet within 200 feet.
And on top of that, to the board members, we require our employees to park outside that area in the public area. They will not be parking within the first 200 feet. So our employees, those 6 employees, will not tie up those parking spaces, even though they're in the calculation.
excellent. So a question to add, and I think I understood Tanner's question to be a little different. Is like, what was the impetus? Why did this trigger site plan approval?
I believe it had to do with the use approval through the zoning board.
Because any use that requires a special permit.
They're expanding a pre-existing non-conforming use. So by getting a special permit for the use, they triggered site plan approval.
Well, it's this.
They're increasing the footprint or the square footage more than the 25%.
And yeah, that as well.
Okay. So now if they're willing to put a deed restriction on the capacity of the seats, which one is more important?
We want to do either.
Well,
I mean, the seats would be the one that they have impetus over. They can't tell the building inspector that their occupant load is this.
but they can put a deed restriction on their property to say that the maximum occupant load is X, right?
Maximum occupant load is determined by the building code. So they could say we won't have more than 98 people in, but I don't know that they can declare their maximum occupant load.
Okay.
Well,
So-
my understanding of that would be that they can restrict it to less, but they can't determine it as more. In other words, like when you do a deed restrictions on number of bedrooms in a house to a septic, you can
Mhm.
restrict it less, but you can't say our septic is a 3-bedroom. So in this,
And that's a fair point.
yeah, and so in this situation where we have a occupant load that's been defined at 98 people, as long as we define it as less, I don't see an issue with that. Or the 92 seats, whichever way we want to do it. So, but I guess my only, and this doesn't really specifically to this applicant's situation, I think as a board, it would be good to have an understanding of how public spaces work and so on, because we've looked at other properties that we're talking about parking on land that they don't necessarily own. And so I think it would be wise to have a good understanding of how that works, because, you know, the lakefront along Whalum, at least my understanding is that it's all publicly owned. And so I'm very comfortable with them using those parking spaces. It makes no difference to me whether a person parks there to fish off the front of the lakefront or to walk into Embers or on the rocks or anything else in that area. But if we're dealing with situations where that land isn't publicly owned, where it's owned by a private ownership and there's a lease or something like that, I think that would be something we want to be aware of. But I don't see any issue with what they're proposing. And the waiver they're requesting.
Mr. Chair, you have two members of the public with their hands up, Ms. Adams and then Mr. Bittner.
This is not a public hearing.
It is not.
We will briefly let them voice their concerns. Andrea first, please. Ms. Adams?
Yes, sir. I think your logic is impeccable. I would recommend, if you're going to entertain a deed restriction, that it be based on the number of seats, since that's what typically also talks about the need for toilets, how many toilets and the flow, because it's key to people. And the only procedural question I have is, if it's pre-existing non-conforming use and you're allowing him to go up within the existing footprint, are you exacerbating the nonconformity in the sense that you allowed to do that based on?
He did that through the zoning board.
Okay, so fair enough. So yeah, I would recommend that you let the building inspector or commissioner do whatever he or she needs to do with the occupant load. And if he's willing to provide a suitable recordable deed restriction on the number of seats, I think will get you where you want to go.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the input.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I just want to comment that the occupancy also has to include the employees, because even though they're not sitting, they're in the building. And I believe Mr. Xera said he has 6 employees. So that 92 plus the 6 employees would bring us to the 98.
Duly noted. Good point. Thank you. Mr. Bittner?
So basically, there is a possible remedy. I mean, even if you, again, I'm not in favor or opposed to the waivers, but there is a way to find a happy medium. I think in your rules and regs regarding site plan approval, you can waive any and all documents you want. So it wouldn't be like a cumbersome to the applicant, or you can waive the fee and that kind of thing, and it might be able to record and establish these concerns on paper as part of a site plan, where it wouldn't be cumbersome to the applicant, cause any added expense, but then it would also be recorded and you could also revisit it at some point in the future.
That's a very good point as well. Thank you for bringing it up. So our site plan approval does allow us to put additional conditions. But in my view, and as I understand the views of the other members to be expressed, that this is an existing non-conforming use, and with the amicable volunteering of the deed restriction by the applicant, I honestly don't see the need to put them through a whole bunch of hoops. These are very trying times for everyone, and I appreciate all the businesses that have remained in Lunenburg and have been able to continue. So I don't really, after this conversation, don't seem to have a problem with granting the waiver either. So anybody else? Anybody else? Yes.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion that we approve the request for waiver for site approval for 84 Lakefront Avenue, Embers Pizzeria, with the stipulation that a restriction be placed on the deed limiting the occupancy of the building to 98.
Do you want to make that the occupancy limit, or do you want to limit the number of seats to 92?
Okay, limit the number of seats to 92.
Okay, is that an adequate motion, Adam?
Yes.
Okay, is there
I would second that.
Mr. Brenner seconds it. Excellent. Any further discussion before we roll call vote? Okay, all in favor, Mrs. Bertram,
Aye.
Mr. Brenner,
Aye.
Mr. Cole,
Aye.
and an aye for myself. Thank you so much, Mr. Xarius, and we look forward to patronizing your business every opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the entire board for taking the time to hear us, and we will give you a first-class product.
Excellent.
Take care and have a nice night.
Thank you. You as well.
Bye.
Okay. I think half of his application was a butter notification. More than half. The condos. Okay. So our next order of business, we have 3 public hearings tonight. The first one is a continuation from 426 for 101 Street, waiver and setback discussion. And who do we have speaking to this?
Paul Grazowitz, Graz Engineering.
Okay. Welcome.
Good evening.
And, good evening, Mr. Chairman. David Plunkett also here for the petitioner.
Okay. I don't mean to be, I assume you're an attorney?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, want to give us the...
Right, yeah, Mr. Chairman, just I'll actually defer to Paul just in terms of he's submitted a letter of explanation relative to the 3 waivers, and I'll let him go through the 3 as outlined in his letter to the board.
Excellent. We typically prefer that. Thank you. Mr. Graz.
Okay. So there were 3 waivers that we enumerated on the cover sheet of the subdivision. And the first one was sidewalk requirement. Upon further review and putting this letter together, reading the requirements in 325 4.9, it's the way it's worded, it only requires sidewalks on major streets, and this is a minor road or a minor street. Therefore, a sidewalk is not required by the regulation. So we don't need that waiver.
Agreed.
Unless the board has a policy that differs from that.
No, I believe your explanation is adequate. Adam, do you have anything to add to that?
I don't. That was my recollection as well.
Okay.
The second waiver had to do with the intersection radius on the entrance of Pleasant Street. On the southerly side of the entrance, we did meet the requirement for the 30-foot radius. However, the lengths, the regulations require curved radius plus tangents on each end of it. And that was getting us into the driveway of an abutter. So given the comments from Graves, other comments, I think what I want to do is strive to eliminate the need for that waiver by pushing the road a little more to the northwest and gaining more room to get that full curving on that right-hand side. I can shorten some drainage pipe up. That'll give me some room to work with. And I think we might be able to do it without the waiver. So I'm not asking for that waiver at this point in time.
Okay, so that eliminates two.
Yep. Now the third one, of course, is the dead end road length. So your regulation has a max length of 650 feet. And we've got 843 feet from the sideline of Pleasant Street to the center line of the proposed cul-de-sac. The regulations do allow for the board to allow longer roads if necessitated by topo or other local conditions. Our limiting site conditions are related to the wetlands. We don't reach usable land until we're about 300 feet into the project. And furthermore, because of the wetlands to the north side, the lots are going to be very narrow. So they're kind of elongated with the center line of the road, and they have a shorter depth. So we're burning up a lot of road frontage in order to get a building lot because of that. We have way more than enough frontage, but we have to make the lots long in order to get the required square footage. So in doing a little research, and obviously I'm sure there's more, but we did find another subdivision that was done in recent history, which was Butterfly Lane. Yeah, Butterfly Lane, which had 9 lots and about 765 feet of road length. And the shortening of our road will result in the loss of lots, undoubtedly. And, whereas the Commonwealth has identified the need for providing new housing as a priority, shortening the road is going to mean less lots, less buildings, and it will drive up the cost of the houses on the project. A justification for having a longer road length is these road length standards originated from probability and engineering studies. So the Institute of Transportation Engineers says that the dead end road length, the maximum length, is really a function of density and terrain. So if you've got a fairly level site, which we have here, at a very low density, they recommend 1,000 foot as a maximum dead end length, and it really boils down to a probability of the road getting blocked and that type of thing. So typically, once you get around 20 units on a dead end road, the probability for an incident, raises. So we've only got 6 lots here, 6 duplexes, so it's a very low density. So, we feel that our request for the 843 feet it's not excessive, and it's not atypical.
Okay. Very good. Well, I appreciate your reasoning. Is there a perceived benefit to the town for granting this waiver? I didn't see it listed in your explanations.
The only benefit would be additional housing availability.
I honestly don't feel that is a benefit to the town. I mean, more residences is more draw on the police, more draw on the fire, more draw on the emergency. Assuming they'll have kids, it's more draw on the schools. Now, you mentioned Butterfly Lane. Butterfly Lane provided access to a conservation area at the end of their dead end road. are you proposing to provide access to anything?
No, we are not. No. I mean, we're making provisions for the existing gravel road that's there to other lands of the owner, of the applicant, but no, not as access to public lands.
So I guess I'll just have to repeat that I don't see any public benefit. And I'll open it up to the board.
Mr. Chairman?
Hello?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, could I just respond on that issue?
Certainly.
All right. In terms of the development, there is a benefit to the town to have housing that is part of your housing stock. That's, you know, the more you have available, the more affordable it is. And this actually has been recognized in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as one of the primary issues that they're trying to deal with in terms of the affordability of housing, and that the problem that Massachusetts has is that the failure to produce housing at the, you know, equal to the need of the housing has given way to a increase of housing that makes us less competitive with other areas. That's one of the directives coming out from Boston in terms of what they're trying to do. One of the things with the overhaul of 40A and everything, you know, in the subdivision rules and regulations and permitting, that's one of their recognized caveats that, you know, what we have to do is try to lessen the impact of the cost of development. So here you have a major, you know, a significant parcel of land that isn't going to be overburdened. I think it was a very, important aspect that was brought up by Mr. Grass in terms of saying that, look, you know, this is not something that, you know, they're looking to extend the roadway so that they can add, you know, a significant number of houses. This is something that is, you know, attributed to the layout or the nature of the land. So, it is something that's been recognized in the Commonwealth as a need, and certainly it would be beneficial to the town to have housing available, housing stock available that doesn't drive up the costs, as opposed to having more availability. You know, the pricing is then going to be reflective of that.
Okay, so how many of these 12 units are going to be affordable?
I mean, we're not talking about affordable. Neither is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts when they're talking about housing stock. They're not talking about all housing stock being affordable. They're talking.
They're also not concerned about our safe harbor number. So every unit that goes in increases our safe harbor number.
Yeah.
Are any of these units proposed to be affordable?
There was no, that's not part of the proposal, no.
Well, that's also another bylaw of ours, that anything more than 10 units is required to have affordability.
Well, if that's an element of the bylaws, then we'd have to see that and see how it reflects into this development.
Okay. So I don't mean to be too frank or rough or anything, but I reviewed the last meeting. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it, and I apologize. But I think that you got a resounding negative inclination to approve these waivers at the last meeting. And now you've got a fourth negative inclination to approve these waivers. The site appears to be more than half wetlands. As far as I can see, a benefit to the town would be preserving it in its natural state and allowing for the wetlands and the forests and everything to be natural, and then build houses where it's more appropriate. But it is private property, and it is developable, but I don't know it's developable to the extent of 12 units. And that's just my personal opinion as one member of this board. And so I'm going to go back to opening it up to the members of the board for input.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd like to chime in and kind of speak to the previous meeting that we had.
Please do. Thank you.
We did discuss the affordability. That was a topic that came up. So at the 10th unit, it does trigger having a percentage of the units be affordable.
10%.
And yep, and representative of the applicant at that point said that they would comply with that. My general feeling on waivers is that they really should be reserved for pre-existing non-conforming applications. This is not pre-existing or non-conforming. This is a piece of raw land that is looking to be developed. And I think any of the new developments going forward need to meet the current standard. Otherwise, we undermine all of the bylaws. I mean, what good is a bylaw if you continuously waive it? And I understand that this particular site is posing some challenges due to the wetland, but those wetland conditions were existing when the applicant purchased the property. And so it is reasonable to me to expect that he was aware of that and needs to proceed accordingly. And so I wouldn't be in favor of approving the waiver.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
My concern with the waiver is that, as you guys all know, my big issue is stormwater and its impacts. And the addition of 200 additional feet of pavement, certainly within this sensitive area of wetlands, is a concern to me. The fact that it borders a cold water fishery, and adding another 200 feet of roadway and the contaminants associated with that roadway concern me. So I would not necessarily be in favor of granting a waiver for this type of length, simply because of the potential impacts to the environment.
Very good. And before I call on Mr. Brenner, I want to mention that waivers are site specific, are project specific, and honestly, it doesn't matter that we've granted them in the past, because when we granted them in the past, it was for past projects, a specific project. And it has been a constant sore to me on this board for 8 years, 9 years, I'm not sure, that people come to this board and justify granting a waiver simply because it's been granted before.
We're not doing that. Your regulation clearly says if necessitated by topo or other local conditions. I mean, I took a look at this Butterfly Lane. The waiver was granted for topography reasons. The site was flat. There was no topography problem, but the waiver got granted, which doesn't make any sense to me. Now, we have some real local conditions that do impact the land and the need to make a long road in order to get in there. And I'm just saying, we have local conditions. Your regulation makes that allowance. Doesn't say it may be granted if you're providing public benefit. It says it may be granted if the board is necessitated by other conditions. And yes, it's your right to say yes, and it's your right to say no. I'm just saying, to point out that's been done in the past. I'm not saying that's why you have to grant it. I'm just saying there is a history there, and boards change through the years and philosophies change, but the regulation reads the same. So,
I understand, and I apologize if you took offense, and I certainly didn't mean any. I think this might be the first time that we've seen you before, Mr. Graz.
Yeah, first time to the planning board, right?
So that certainly wasn't aimed at you, but we have seen others in the past fairly regularly and consistently that try to use that you've granted it in the past. And actually, I work in the field, and and it's a common thing. And I don't agree with it because it is site specific. So you're trying to squeeze 12 units onto this piece of property that's riddled with wetlands. So granting the waiver would allow you maximum density in your mind, but that's not what the planning board is charged with. So Mr. Brenner, you're the last one to weigh in here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question that you or Mr. Burney may be able to answer, just to make sure that I'm understanding correctly, based on what the applicant is also saying, that so in order to grant the waiver, there would need to be some kind of condition, which seems some topographic or site condition, but that also our bylaws do also require a public benefit. Do I understand that correctly, that we would need both in this case?
I'm going to have to defer to Adam because I've always assumed that was the case. I don't know if it's written down.
I know that in the site plan and special permit rules and regulations, we included a clause about the benefit to the town of waiver granting and how that applied. I would have to look a little further into the subdivision regs to see if that is in there. Again, with it may have been a long policy on the board. Mr. Allison has been on the board longer than I, or has dealt with the board longer than I. Frankly, this is the first subdivision that's come across the table in the time that I've been here.
Yeah.
To show how frequently we do these. So if you want to, Mr. Bittner and Ms. Adams have their hands up. If you want to take their comments, I can flip through.
Oh yeah, this is a public hearing, so I will hear Ms. Adams.
Thank you, sir. Whoops. Thank you, sir. I guess full disclosure, my mother is one of the abutters. But secondly, in full disclosure, I also worked in the field for a long time, 25 years with the Cape Cod Commission and 5 years for the town of Watertown. I did look at your subdivision regulations and your guidance for applicants. In the guidance, it states 4 things, one of which must be in the public interest.
Right.
I guess I would say that from my perspective, if you also look at a previous submittal by the same applicant, their discussion of their meeting, they have to go through various different sections, meeting the master plan, environmental impacts, traffic impacts, and other things. One of their points is that the project is designed as economically feasible, and that issue is directly linked to the road length. So to put the pin in the issue, I think that the reason why the road is as long as it is to maximize the benefit to the developer. And that's what they're supposed to do. I get it. But in terms of what issues the town is looking at, I believe that the board is well within its rights to, number one, interpret its regulations as it sees fit. As you said, Mr. Allison, review every project on its own merits, so you're not required to copy what you did on previous projects. And that similarly situated applicants should be treated similarly. I don't think they're similar to Butterfly Lane because you had the road length linked to a public benefit. That sort of goes hand in hand in all of the planning that development regulation that I did. So the other thing about the affordability and the housing stock, yes, the governor is interested in increasing housing stock. But increasing housing stock per se does not guarantee that the stock that's created is affordable. That's a self-referential argument. The only way to truly guarantee that the units are affordable, which is the real crux of the issue, is that you have a restriction that determines that they, in fact, are affordable within the definition of the state. So it's a catch-22 in the sense that just having more units doesn't guarantee that those are going to be priced at a point where people can buy them that are at 80% area median income or less. So from my perspective, and I said this to the gentleman working for Graz Engineering who was at the previous hearing, it's an extremely challenging site. I think that on its face, there are a number of different requirements that need to be waived or done differently. And I know this is the planning board. I'll refer to the Concom, for example, the wetland replication, that when you add them all up on a sheet, sort of pros and cons, you've got so many things that have to be done in order to make this particular development proposal viable, that in the end, I don't think they amount to something that is going to be successful or approvable, even if you had a series of conditions. I think it's a situation where you have the project proponent has a right to develop the lot, but he doesn't have a right to any particular return on investment. That's been settled in federal case law for decades. So, I acknowledge that he has a right to develop his property, but I think that this proposal just is a bridge too far. It's the series of different things that you have to do in order to put this particular project on this piece of property are too far in the negative column. And thank you for allowing me to speak.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate your input. Thank you very much. And I think I may have not gotten your address for Marjorie. Oh,
Sorry, Marjorie. I live in Woburn at 118 Green Street, but I'm here representing my mom, who is B. Adams, who lives at 39 Pleasant Street.
Excellent. I think that should clear everything up for her and she can do what she needs to with it. Appreciate it. Mr. Bittner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to echo Ms. Adams' remarks that it's not this board's job to modify the bylaw to maximize profit, and they spelled it out right in their environmental impact. They said that the reduction of housing units will also make the project less financially viable for the developer to generate a profit. So they basically spelled it out in their own application that that's their reason for the lengthening of the road is to maximize profit. He pointed out that you have granted waivers in the past, but you have also denied them in the past. I'm sure they didn't look for those. And as far as their municipal benefit versus cost element, I don't know what kind of magic hat they pulled these numbers out of, but they seem cherry picked. According to their estimation, it would cost $1,147 per unit. In education, they're estimating that the 3-bedroom units have 2 children, so that would mean that it only costs $600 to educate a child per year in Lunenburg. I'd like it to be not only site-specific, but the environmental impact should be specific to Lunenburg, not a standard of other communities. So, and I would not be in favor of the waivers.
I thought it was like 3,000 something per child, typically.
11,000.
11,000?
Mm-hmm.
1,000.
11,000, yes.
Per year?
Mm-hmm.
So they're off by
Cost, yes, that is the cost, yes.
2. Wow. Okay.
We're actually below average statewide, not by a lot, but we're below the median across the state.
Okay. Public hearing. Any further public comment? Yes, Mr. Plunkett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Relative to the comments on the wetlands, obviously that, we're well aware of the fact there is a parallel hearing going on with the Conservation Commission. So the issues relative to the wetland areas will have to be finalized, reviewed, and approved by conservation. So, in terms of that aspect as a negative from the perspective of the planning board, it is something that it's going to be addressed, and we'll have to satisfy the Concom relative to all issues pertaining to the wetland issues at the site. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Ms. Bertram.
I understand that they're going through a Conservation Commission hearing, but the reality is that anytime you increase the amount of impervious surface in an area, you increase the amount of stormwater runoff. That's just a fact. Now, they will have to go through stormwater management and obtain a stormwater permit, and the requirements are that you can't discharge more stormwater post-development than you did pre-development. However, the change is the contaminants associated within that stormwater, and that's my concern. Anytime you add pavement and you start dealing with de-icing products, or you have cars going over an area, the contaminants that is going to be in that compared to untreated, pervious material are going to be very, very different. So yes, the Concom will look from a wetlands perspective to ensure that they meet the wetlands regulations. But the reality is that we have an opportunity to decrease the amount of impervious surface on an area, and it's a very sensitive area in that there's a number of wetlands, and that there's a tributary and a stream that go to Pearl Hill Brook, which is a cold water fishery, and those are few and far between. So therefore, in my opinion, while Concom will look at it from a wetlands regulation standpoint, we have an opportunity to look at it from a stormwater standpoint, under the stormwater permit, and in my opinion, adding an additional 200 feet of roadway just isn't an environmental choice that I would make. So I would actually make a waiver to deny I would make a motion to deny the requested waiver from the planning board requirement for length of street. And I don't have the section, Adam. Do you have the section?
I have a book which has the wrong numbers, and it's give me 1 minute and I can pull it up. It is,
4.2E1.
yes.
So I would make a motion to deny the requested waiver from 4.2E1 of the planning board regulations for the length of road.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Cole seconds. Is there any further discussion before we have a roll call vote? Okay, all in favor of denial of the request for waiver? A roll call vote. Mrs. Bertram?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Mr. Cole?
Aye.
And an aye for myself. Well,
Ms. Adams has her hand up, Mr. Chair.
Um,
Then
Wait
the hearing is still open. You
Just
voted on a waiver within the hearing?
Yeah, it's the waiver from that's Scriveners to clean it up for Marjorie. It's a waiver from the subdivision rules and regs,
Yes, it is.
not the bylaw. So it's
Thank you,
it's
thank you.
understood, but I just
Thank
thought
you.
Thank
then you
you.
have it on
Thank you.
record. Thank you so
Adam,
much.
do you want us to redo the motion in a second for that?
It wouldn't hurt.
I would make a motion to deny the requested waiver from section 4. Now I lost it.
I would call it Code of Lunenburg, Section 325, 4.2E1.
Okay, Code of Lunenburg, 325, section 4.2E1. For length of road.
And Mr. Cole again seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor of denial of the waiver? Roll call vote. Mrs. Bertram?
Aye.
Mr. Brenner?
Aye.
Mr. Cole?
Aye.
And an aye for myself. Okay, so I think that was all we had on the agenda for you folks tonight. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Chair, if I could just chime in to pick up on a point from our last meeting that would help the applicant move forward. At our last meeting, we reviewed the DPW concerns about the road, the access road. And they had several issues in terms of a retaining wall being on the road and so on. And part of that discussion was the fact that the road is intended to be privately owned at this point, but there's nothing that would prevent the applicant from applying to make it a public way in the future. And we discussed what the potential impact of that process would be. And I'm sure the applicant's going to want to kind of go back to the drawing board, if you will. And I think it would just be helpful to try to get to the bottom of that aspect of things before they re-engineer.
Yeah, I very much appreciate you bringing that up. I did notice the DPW's input, and as recollection, hopefully recollection serves me well, is their suggestion was to separate the stormwater and have that held by the homeowners association if the road was to become public. I don't think that's possible. Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the drainage is pertinent to the roadway. Is that not correct?
All things are possible if the applicant is, it's something that can be discussed as we go forward. I think there are ways to make that work.
It is a possibility. Okay.
It is a possibility.
Okay. Because going back to the aforementioned Butterfly Lane, that would have been the ideal spot to have low impact development and have country drainage instead of the Vort entries that need the equipment that our DPW director specifically said that we don't have. So if moving forward, if you do decide to move forward, it would be very much a benefit to everyone involved if you could not have the primary separators, if you could kind of do it more natural, because we don't have a vac truck.
No, I understand that, and you know, maybe with the new layout, new analysis, maybe we can avoid it. To be honest with you, we only use those when it's absolutely no other way to meet our TSS removal in the stormwater.
Yep.
I don't like using them. It's a last resort. Maybe now, you know, when we go back and maybe we can get by without it.
Yeah, with less impervious, that would be good.
Well, and just so we try to keep things on a clear path here, my understanding from the conversation was we were trying to get to the bottom of whether or not we were going to accept the roadway with the objections that the DPW had in terms of retaining walls being in what could potentially become a right of way. So I think it would just be beneficial to give the applicant a clear understanding of, okay, our expectation is that there aren't retaining walls within what could be a right of way, or just so we're clear. I just hate to see.
I understand that. Graves had the same comment, and in our redesign, we're moving those walls out of there. So.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So it seems like everybody's on the same page here, and we're going to approve or do a site plan review on a road that hopefully would meet DPW standards, whether or not it's privately or publicly owned.
And it won't be a site plan review, it will be a definitive subdivision approval.
Yes. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, I think we have two members of the public, Ms. Adams and Mr. Bittner, both have their hands up.
Okay. I thought we were done, but okay. Mrs. Adams.
Thank you again, sir. My question is actually procedural. Given that the most critical waiver to the current development proposal has been denied, and given that there are concerns raised by your consulting engineer as well as the Department of Public Works superintendent, would it not behoove both the applicant and the board to withdraw so that there isn't a project pending that in fact isn't probably the one that you're going to be reviewing again, to give him the time to address these issues without having a clock ticking and the potential for a procedural denial, which would mean he'd have to refile anyway and pay fees again?
We're going to ask for continuations, whatever continuations we need. We don't intend to withdraw it. We're simply responding to comments and discussions with the board and from Graves Engineering. to move forward with the thing. So I'm not going to hold you to any clock.
Well,
That isn't
I will be
something that the
forwarding you
board
a-
can do. It's a statutory clock. And if they don't want to give you a constructive grant, they're going to have to procedurally deny you.
Mr.
Right,
Chairman,
situations.
we are willing to waive any requirement relative to a grant. It's allowed. The applicant can sign something which we agree that the time frame in which to render a decision is something that can be done, and we're more than willing to do so. But at this point, we would request, as Mr. Graz said, a continuance to come back and continue forward with this proposal.
Are you choosing a specific date to return, or are you asking for an open-ended continuance, at which time we would need to re-advertise and renotice?
I would ask for a month continuation, or however your meetings go, pushing it into, into June there.
Well, we meet every second and fourth Monday. So
I'd like to go to the fourth Monday in June. We've got a lot of work to do here.
So I will be sending you a form to fill out and sign and return. And that will be recorded with the town clerk, and that will freeze the time clock between now and that meeting. And then when the hearing opens again, that one day will pass. And if you ask for a further continuance, we'll go through the same procedure.
Okay, fair enough. And that should give us time to actually get plans back to you, get them back to Graves. They can look at them. So things will be, hopefully close next.
So that would be June 28th. I believe Mr. Bittner still has his hand up though before the motion, Mr. Chair.
So are we assuming that your conservation is not going to change? So, I mean, your current.
Right, we're going to be asking for a continuation with conservation also, because it's going hand in hand with them. So
Okay.
it's affecting the.
I didn't realize we had a time clock for definitive subdivision because,
35 days.
well, when you got here, Adam, we were probably 10 years into what turned into 11 years.
What is the time clock?
It's 135 days.
And when will that 135 days be up?
We're on day 47. After that is, so by the applicant requesting the continuance and the board agreeing, with the form filled out and reported to the town clerk, it puts a timeout on the clock. So we have 88 days remaining.
Okay, so we're going to need that form back as soon as
Correct.
possible.
I certainly hope this doesn't turn into something even close to 11 more years.
No.
And I'm sure, I believe you probably feel the same way. Yes. Mr. Bittner, still have some input?
Yeah, just in regards to the conservation, with the stormwater and their review, your purviews sort of overlap. One of the members did request to have communication amongst your board and their board, providing Graves Engineers peer review comments. I was wondering if that request was made through the conservation agent. And if not, if you would be willing to reach out to share that information.
Yeah, I thought I did share Graves with him, and if I didn't, I can hand it to him tomorrow.
Yeah, the meeting was a few weeks ago prior to your last meeting, but the request was made. I just wanted to follow up with that. And then also, I was wondering if I could make a standing request for information regarding this application. Basically, I'd want to receive any documentation related to it instead of having to contact Adam on a weekly basis. And if information comes in that I'm not aware that it came in, I can't really request it. I can do that either through email, through the chair, or basically just a standing request for documents regarding this project.
Sounds reasonable. Adam, is that facilitatable?
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem.
Okay, excellent.
Mr. Chair, along those lines, can we put this project on our website and just update everything.
That's what we got one for, right?
Yeah, I thought it might be up there.
Well, and I'm just saying in terms of any of the updated documentation, so anybody that wants to can follow along on the website and be up to
We
date.
tend to try and keep plans up there. Some of the other documents, we tend to try and put as much as we can up there.
Tell me something, Adam, about public record. As soon as it's submitted to the town, does it become public record, or does it have to have been presented at a meeting?
It is public record once we have it. I mean, this is a public hearing. Once we get materials, people can come and view them.
Okay.
Things that are more opinion-based, council, engineer reviews, I mean, they're technically public record when we get here. Usually we like to have the board at least have them in hand prior to distributing them or letting people see them. But there's really no harm in things like that being out there.
Very good. I assumed so. I just wanted to make it known and clear. So we have a request from the applicant for continuation to a date certain. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That's correct.
28 June.
So we need a motion to accept that, I think, right?
Yes.
So moved.
So moved. Very good. I guess it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Excellent. Mr. Brenner seconds. Mr. Cole motioned. Is there any further discussion about the motion to continue? I don't know what that ding was, but assuming it's not anything else to input. So approval to continue by roll call vote. Mrs. Bertram.
Aye.
Mr. Brenner.
Aye.
Mr. Cole.
Aye.
And an aye for myself. Thank you, folks, very much for your.
Mr. Chairman, could I
Yes.
just ask that when we get close to that 135 days, or even if that we make sure that we have that document filed with the town clerk. I want to make sure that gets done and recognized at a meeting, since we're continuing based on getting that form back and getting it recorded.
It's a very good suggestion, and I'll add to that I would like to have every time we can reopen to a continuance that we be reminded at that meeting how many days are left on the clock. Because we have in the past run into problems with clock keeping. It's not like we have 7 clock winders for a clock that doesn't work, but these are regulatory requirements and we need to stick with them. In fact, the previous board before Adam got here, I don't know if they knew about that, but 11 years was just ridiculous. So a very good suggestion. And Adam, I hope you can just make a note to provide us with that clock information every time.
Yes, I'll make sure you get that.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you. So that was our first public hearing. Our second public hearing is for 757 Chase Road, continued from 3/22. And do we have, yep, I see one. Mr. Amante.
Yes. Yes, I am on the call along with Mike Scott, the professional engineer from our office, and Brian Lafferty from Colonial Automotive Group. So appreciate the board hearing us tonight. I know we had received comments from Graves Engineering and a few of the other departments in town, and we have responded in writing to the Graves comment letter and have revised the plans as well. And most of the comments from the Graves letter was stormwater related. And I know we were late getting this information back to the board. We didn't submit it back to Adam until Friday. And I know obviously the board probably hasn't had time to review it, nor has Graves, but we did want to give the planning board an update as to where we are, since we are running this project concurrently with the ZBA and with the Conservation Commission. So since we last met, we did have our meeting with the ZBA on April 14th. We requested a special permit and an amendment to an existing special permit, and we did receive both of those. And that was basically related to the setbacks to parking across the frontage and vehicle display and pavement within those areas. So we did receive those approvals. They did ask us to increase some of the landscaping areas across the front of the site, which has resulted in more green space where Adam is pointing right now. So again, we did receive comment letters. We have responded. I know the board and the peer review has not had time to review those at this point. So, it looks like we would probably ask to continue until the next hearing, unless the board had some specific questions on what was submitted, if they did have a chance to review it.
So I'm looking at reduced set, and it's double-sided. But they're upside down and they're stapled in the wrong corner. Well, it is a criticism, but it's not a huge issue. It's just, as a person who prepares plans like this, I understand the challenges sometimes, but just to facilitate the review, it oftentimes it would benefit you to have something that was a little bit more concise. But no, and I'm sorry that I haven't had opportunity to review the plans.
Okay. I thought only PDFs were submitted, so I'm not sure what happened there with the plan set.
Oh, well, that might have been in it. I didn't think we prepared these.
Yeah, we didn't get these plans until 11:15 this morning, so I haven't had a chance to review them yet.
Understood.
Okay, so I think everybody was aware that they came in later than we require. So we can talk about whatever you like because you're on our agenda.
Well, the only, again, most of the comments were basically stormwater related. There were a couple of minor comments about vehicle tracking, having a car carrier maneuver through the site. I think that was a comment at the last hearing that we had. So we did make adjustments to that. It sounds like the board wouldn't be willing to condition the approval based on final stormwater review by Graves. So I guess that was the only thing that we would ask the board to consider, but we understand if they want to take the time to review the plans, that's totally understandable on our end. And, we'd be happy to continue to the next hearing.
Yeah, and also to speak to your question, I'm not sure that we ever have approved anything conditional upon the review of the engineer.
That's fine. Yep, that's understood.
I think the board in the past has had, maybe there were one or two minor specific issues that were awaiting resolution that they've conditioned. Never something as not nebulous as stormwater.
Yeah,
thank you.
Understood.
I think my consultant was just trying to run up my bill.
Nice.
Maybe you can also get Mr. Rogers here next time. He was your cheerleader last meeting.
That's right.
Make arrangements to get him, Jim, if you want to get paid for this.
Yes, I'll ask Adam for his phone number.
So are you asking for the 24th or the first meeting in June?
Well, I guess the ball is kind of in your court, in Graves' court at this point. So however much time they need to review the letter and the plans.
The longer the better, probably.
Mr. Chair, I just had a quick comment in regards to the vehicle tracking.
Yes, please.
I haven't had an opportunity to take a good look at the plans either, but it seems to me as though based on the vehicle profile that they're planning on straight trucks, not tractor trailers, with an overall length of 40 feet. And my question would be that, at least in my business, a lot of the freight we receive from trucking companies are at least small tractor trailers. And I know on the previous set of plans, there were a couple of lines where it was really close to the building or driving over a median. And so I just bring that point up to bring it to the engineer's attention. In my mind, even though the vast majority of what they receive may come on a straight car carrier or a small car carrier that's articulated in the middle, I think the property should be provisioned so that if UPS freight shows up with a 48-foot trailer and a tractor towing it, that vehicle should be able to navigate the site without using parking on the side of the public way or backing in off of the road or things
I
of
think
that
there are two vehicle paths. The 40-foot is the fire engine, which the chief said is more than adequate. And the second one is a 56-foot trailer with a 15-foot cab.
Okay.
Which we have found are more restrictive than, like a typical WV50 or WV62. The car carriers are more difficult to maneuver through a site.
Okay.
Yes. And you bring up a good point. Thank you, Mr. Cole. I'm personally going to push for a condition on the approval that unloading on the street is no longer allowed. So I think that was made clear the first meeting.
Right, and that was actually.
So if I was looking at the 40-foot straight vehicle, but then in looking at the profile for the 56-foot trailer on that diagram, it's still driving over a median and very close to the back right corner of the building, which would be the northeast corner. So I just bring it up as a point that hopefully can be resolved.
If I can comment on that while it's fresh in everybody's mind.
Yes, sir.
Brian Lafferty from Colonial Automotive Group. We fully expect a condition that prohibits us from unloading vehicles on the street. I mean, that's perfectly fine. We're used to that, and that's exactly how it should be. I don't have any argument. But if I'm looking at this correctly, it's the back rear corner where we may run into a problem. And I don't know if Jim can make some adjustments back there. But there would be no reason for a tractor trailer back there. We would obviously need to be able to get the fire apparatus around that corner, which I think we can clearly do. If we can't make the adjustment out there, again, there's no reason for a tractor trailer to be there because parts are delivered somewhere else. But as one of the members pointed out, the UPS guys just show up and want to go anywhere. I would suggest that if we can't adjust that and provide a little bit more room there, then we use signage to prohibit any tractor trailers from getting into that back area where maneuvering becomes difficult.
Oh, sure. And certainly we're not interested in causing you hardship, but quite frankly, anything that goes on in your site with your equipment and your vehicles is, I don't think, a big concern for us.
No, it's our own self-interest I'm looking at right now, Mr. Allison. We don't want to tractor trailer whacking our new vehicles sitting out there or whacking the corner of the building.
Understood.
So it's to benefit both sides, both the planning board concerns and our business concerns. So we will address that corner, either adjust the geometry or make it clear that we're prohibiting those sorts of vehicles from the back.
Oh, sure. So in that regard, you may also want to revisit your 40-foot vehicle because it runs into a couple parking spaces as well.
Mr. Almonte, I hope you're listening to Mr. Allison.
I am. Thank
you.
And I know those auto turns, I assume using auto turn, it's not the most user-friendly, but
it's not. It's vehicle tracking. It's the newer version of auto turn, but it's they're usually pretty conservative when it comes to these movements.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. Very good.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, please.
just a question where you are on the design of the septic system for this property and what testing has been done and where the septic system is going to be located?
Yes, the septic system, we have done soils testing, and it would be in the location of the existing system towards the rear of the property. It's behind the Mazda dealership, way in the back left-hand corner of the property.
Okay, but where are you in regards to design? Just because I'm asking this because I want to make sure that when you get to the final design stages, that the grading or the final topography isn't going to affect your design and or the stormwater flows.
We're in the process of designing that now. Like I said, there is an existing system there. It should not affect stormwater or anything else. It's well off the pavement.
Well, I will just say that having worked for the Board of Health for 18 years, I'm very familiar with septic designs, and personally, I would want to see the final proposed grades of that system, and I would want before I would move forward with an approval on this plan. Just an FYI. Additionally, you have an industrial holding tank that you're proposing, and is that shown on the plan?
Yes, it's just off the bottom of the page there. It may not be on this plan. It may be on the next sheet, the utility plan.
Okay, because I did look for it and I didn't see it, but I might have just missed it.
It's right there, as you exit the service area, and it's just off the top of the page there. Right there, exactly.
Okay, and have you done testing for the existing property that you're proposing to be subdivided off of this?
No, we have not.
Okay.
That's on it. Yeah, that would have to pass Title V. That's on its own separate system.
Okay. Okay, and the subdivision of this lot, Adam, has that been done or that's going to be done as part of this process, or where are we within the subdivision of the lot?
I believe it's proposed. I don't think the A&R has been submitted.
Okay.
No, we would do that after this process.
Okay, so that will come later as far as the existing house being separated.
Correct.
Okay.
That will be a self-sustaining lot by itself, and we understand the obligations that go with that. So the configuration of the lot will make that residential lot self-sustaining with everything it needs for its own setback, septic, well, et cetera.
Okay.
Are we the 777? I'm sorry, are you talking about separating 777?
Yes.
Okay, well, that looks like a challenge for if the existing garage is gonna go away, it's probably okay, right?
Yes, that's the plan.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and as far as utilities, your review, I'm trying to skim your response to the review comments, and you say that the final design of the holding tank will be designed by a plumbing engineer. Wouldn't that normally be part of this design?
No, it's inside the building.
Okay, okay, thank you. Hmm.
10 feet out. 10 feet out is, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So you've requested a continuance, right? To the date certain? Is that correct? Or am I-
Well, I'm not sure the date has been determined yet, but
Okay.
I think the 7th of June is probably a more realistic target. If you want to come back on the 24th, it's in your wheelhouse to ask, but the board would probably want to see everything within, the next 8 to 10 days. And I haven't spoken to Jeff about it, so I can't obligate him to have that done.
No, let's go to the 7th, Adam. So
I
the
was
board
waiting-
has plenty of time to review, and your consultant has plenty of time to get things together. And Mr. Almonte's office can work together with Graves Consulting to get everything in order for the planning board.
I would make a motion to continue the hearing for 757 Chase Road to June 7th at 6:30, 5 PM.
I would second.
Second.
Mr. Brenner, was that a second?
Yes, it was.
Excellent. Okay. Is there any further discussion to continuance of the hearing? Hearing none, we'll concurrence with that, roll call vote. Mr. Brenner,
Aye.
Mrs. Bertram,
Aye.
Mr. Cole,
Aye.
and an aye for myself. Thank you, folks, very much. And we will try to make sure that Mr. Brenner is with us on that date.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Have a good night. Thanks for your time, everybody.
You as well.
Thank you.
All right. Our third public for this evening is 711 Massachusetts Avenue. Mr. Fliss, I assume?
Good evening.
Good evening. This is the opening of this public hearing, correct?
That is correct.
All right, so I have the ditty I have to read then. And I'm going to make sure it's the right one. Well, it's probably the only one in my packet, so I'm going to go ahead and start reading. The Lunenburg Planning Board will hold a public hearing on May 10, 2021, 6:35 via Zoom video conference to hear and review applications for site plan approval and stormwater management permit under Chapter 250, Section 8.4 and Chapter 204 respectively of the Code of the Town of Lunenburg for construction of 4 2-unit townhouse buildings totaling 8 units at 711 Massachusetts Avenue, Lot 4, map 059, parcel 0030. Owner applicant is EF Realty LLC, 654 Elm Street, Leominster, Mass. Materials are available for viewing at the planning office, 960 Mass Ave, Lunenburg, Mass. In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions, this is a repeat of the opening. So we are officially open our public hearing.
Evening, Wesley Fliss, Whitman and Bingham Associates.
Good evening.
Eric Fowler is also here from EF Realty.
Excellent. Welcome, Mr. Fowler.
You're here to represent the project at 711 Mass Ave. Adam is sharing the existing conditions plan currently. So the property is slightly less than 4.5 acres, located off of Mass Ave, adjacent to the intersection of Chestnut Street. There are environmental issues on the property that we are designing around. There is a perennial stream that runs along the western side of the property that Adam's moving his hand in there. There's also wetlands associated with that. Obviously, we have the local wetlands bylaw that we need to abide by with regards to the no-touch zone, the no-build zone, and also we have the state regulations with regards to the 100-foot inner riparian zone and the 200-foot outer riparian zone. I know when the Mr. Allison, you had stated in the opening that there was 2 buildings, 8 units. That was the original submittal that we had that we actually got approval from the ZBA for. Since we've had that, we've had some conversation with Mr. Burney in regards to the requirements of the town and have updated our plans to actually show 4 duplexes, still 8 units, same number of units that we were proposing before, but now we're showing the 8 units in duplexes. The reason we made the change was to put the parking in between the buildings. Previously, we had the parking in front of the site. Now we have the units being the first thing you kind of see off of Mass Ave, the first 2 units. And then the parking would be in between. And then the other 2 buildings will be in the back.
Oh, good. And I'm sorry if I could interrupt you for a second. Adam, is that okay that the public hearing notice was not entirely accurate?
It gives enough information for interested parties to attend and view. The number of units is correct. 2 or 4 buildings is, I mean, could easily have been modified by the board. The ad is correct, the applicant is correct. So,
Very good.
I do have a question on this, though, in regards to the ZBA application, because the ZBA application shows a different layout than what is now proposed. And where does that leave the approval from the ZBA perspective?
Yeah, and so that was something that we were going to talk with the building inspector about. The approval was for townhouses. So in the zoning district that we're in, being the limited business residential district, we need to get a special permit for through the zoning board of appeals for townhouses in the zoning district. So that was what the special permit was, for the use of townhouses on this property.
I
We'll work with the building inspector, and if we need to update the special permit through the ZBA, we will.
Okay, because I know I did read the permit, but it's just a different plan than what the ZBA approved, and that's my concern.
Yep, and so that's something that we will work with the building inspector with, and make sure that that he's comfortable with that. And if we have to go back in front of the ZBA, we will take care of that as part of the process. We also do need to work with the Conservation Commission, and we are working on putting together an application for the Conservation Commission. For obviously work within their jurisdiction also. So there's a process here. One thing I'll get right out of the way is obviously there's no peer review as of this point. And so we understand that we'll have to be back in front of the board at least once or twice. And so our intent is obviously to ask for a continuation at the end of the evening to allow for that process to happen, the peer review process to happen, us to work with the peer reviewer, make any changes that are required through the peer review process. But that's kind of why we wanted to make the change to the plan that you see tonight, is to kind of make that preemptive change already. We didn't want to wait until that comment came back from the peer reviewer and then have to, peer review a completely different plan. We wanted to, get ahead of them before they even reviewed the plan and show the updated plan that they really will review. Hopefully that will take care of the main issue, being that parking in the that 25-foot offset to the to Mass Ave. And so that was really what the impetus behind making the changes to the plan were. Well, let me quickly go over the project, and hopefully I can answer some questions tonight. Like I said, at the end of this, we're going to look for a continuation, hopefully address some of the concerns that maybe come up tonight from the board and some of the residents, and also obviously take care of the peer review comments that will come up. And so I stated that, there's 4 buildings, 4 duplexes. Adam, do you mind if I share my screen?
you can't share your screen.
What's that?
The Zoom settings are such that we don't allow.
Okay. Did Jamie send you the architectural plans?
I don't remember seeing them. Were they in the submission packet?
I don't know if they are. Is that something I can forward you, and I can talk about something else until
Yeah, that's fine.
Adam, if I don't think the Zoom settings restrict that, because when we're in the TCP building design committee, the engineers and the architects share.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it says host disabled. See, when I asked for it, it says
share.
host disabled participant sharing. So it's up to you, whoever the host is. Who's the host? Adam, are you the host?
Yeah, I'm the host.
So again, I can forward you the.
Yeah, if you email it to me, I'll pop them up.
And I know that's typically, obviously one of the questions that you guys obviously have is regards to what the buildings look like, but we can talk about the site first, and then when Adam receives, we can pop those up. But as I said, there's gonna be four duplexes. 3 of the duplexes are gonna have access to a garage for each unit, and so there'll be 6 garages total on the site. In front of those garages, there'll be enough space at least to park 1 vehicle. The lower 2 units, the lower right-hand side, those 2 units actually will have I think enough room to actually park 2 vehicles in front of the garage. What we did propose is actually enough spaces without the garages, enough even without the space in front of the garages, to have 16 parking spaces. So there are 2 parking spaces per unit on the site. The unit breakdown is going to be 6 3-bedroom units and then 2 2-bedroom units is how. And I'm not sure it shows on this plan. I think it was, that's been an update since we submitted the plan, but it's an update the applicant wants us to make sure you're aware of. And so that's where we are now, is we're looking at 22 total bedrooms for the development. And I think it might show on, like I said, when Adam gets the email, he'll show you the floor plans too. But, we feel that we have plenty enough parking for the development. Actually, probably overkill the parking to some extent, but at least if there's visitor parking available for this development, so nothing obviously on Mass Ave. We don't want people parking on a Mass Ave or impacting the driveway. And so the development has a 24-foot wide driveway off of Mass Ave to bring into the site. The parking spaces meet the zoning requirements. 20-foot wide driveway to bring ourselves to the parking spaces. The units will be serviced by municipal water and sewer. We'll be tying into the water and sewer out on Mass Ave. I know Mr. Burney had let us know today that the DPW or the highway department did have a few comments with regards to how the connections, they want to see the connections happen for the sewer. Obviously, we'll work with the water department also, make sure that they're comfortable with the water connection there. The drainage on the property will be a private on-site subsurface drainage system, where we have one stormwater basin on the westerly side of the project. We have swales, I believe it's 2 or 3 swales throughout the site to direct the stormwater to the basin. We don't have any catch basins on the property. We were trying to go with more of a low impact type development where we didn't have that hard drainage underground system. Like I said, where the water's sheet flow off the parking lot and the driveways and the walkways and even off the roofs into the swales and then into the forebays and into the detention basin.
No architecturals in what you sent me, Wes.
They weren't, did I send you?
No. You sent me the application packet and the plans we're currently showing right here.
Let me, sorry about that, Adam.
That's all right.
And so the site is said, you can see on the site plan in front of you, like I said, the basin is going to be on their upper left-hand side. All the water, stormwater will be directed to that from the development. Everything will be treated through the forebay to the in the swales and then into the detention basin, released out to the wetlands and then to the stream. The stormwater runs from a north-south orientation in those wetlands. Will go back under Mass Ave where it goes now through a box culvert. As I stated, we will file obviously with the Conservation Commission for the work in their jurisdiction. We do show erosion control measures on the property around the limits of disturbance to the north and the westerly side of the project. And then also near the entrance where we do have our construction entrance. Obviously, we work with the Conservation Commission to make sure that they're comfortable with the application, but we did design it to meet the requirements of their, still not the, there we go. So just so everybody has an idea of what they're proposing. You can kind of see how the duplexes look. Like I said, each duplex has a 1-car garage. That's going to be the back of the buildings where they have their own decks. Living space on the first floor, the dining room. They have their porches. Obviously, the bulkheads. There will be a basement. And these are the 3-bedroom units. Like I said, there will be 6 3-bedroom units, and then there'll be the 2 2-bedroom units. So the second floor will just be different with regards to how the bedroom set up. So the bedrooms will be larger, where they'll be merged more, but the layout will be the same. And then you get the finished basement and just the different elevations of the building. But like I said, I think the rendering shows fairly well of what the thought is there, especially that view there. We can see they're trying to make it look architecturally pleasing and to kind of blend into the site there. Other than that, I mean, like I said, we're obviously going to wait for the peer review to happen, deal with any of the peer review items that will come up. I know, like I said, the Public Works Department, they've already submitted their comments, and we'll see if from any of the other departments submits comments, and we'll go from there. I don't know if any of the board members has questions at this point. I can do my best to answer the questions. And like I said, the biggest thing is to get the peer review completed and see what they have for questions.
Well, I'll go ahead and start it off. Just a comment that that perennial stream is the beginning of the Catacoulomog, which is also a cold water fishery. So that's important to us. And that's also on a very bad corner. So the setback is 25 feet from Mass Ave there? Is that what
No,
you said?
so what had happened was the parking, the original plan showed parking within the offset that we weren't allowed to. And so the previous design that was done showed parking in the front of the site. Which it
These
wasn't
two
allowed.
buildings together with parking in front.
Oh, I thought our regulations specified no parking in front.
They do.
They do.
Which is why we've ended up with this.
Okay.
And if you read the ZBA decision, a member of the zoning board had concerns about the impact of parking on the road from light trespass, as well as just general aesthetics. So this resolves some of the issues outlined within the zoning board hearing.
Okay. Thank you. So getting back to that's one of our busiest roads in town, and it's also a very bad corner with the intersection of a road and a daycare across the street. I was really hoping to see one house go in there personally, but that neither here nor there. You do have the box checked for a traffic report, so that should give us some information. Yeah, it's a tough spot, but
It is yeah, I won't, obviously that was one of the things that we looked at originally too on this. And one thing that we were looking at, I was trying to see if I had, Mr. Allison, if I could just, I know quickly you pointed out in regards to the cold water fishery. And so I know with regards to our drainage calculations, our water quality volume was done for the 1 inch of runoff because of that.
now that qualifies as a ORW.
Well, because of the cold water fishery, typically we design it for it doesn't qualify as an ORW, but because of the cold water fishery, we did design it for 1 inch instead of half an inch.
Okay.
Of recharge. And so what we were looking at, and correct, obviously we understand the corner, obviously with Chestnut Street and Mass Ave and it being a busy street. What we looked at it as we are actually on the correct side of the curve when we look at onto a curve. We're on the outside of a curve, so we have better sight distance in the directions, in the two directions. And so that was what we were looking at is correct. We don't disagree that it's a tough turn, but we think because of the way it's sighted, sight distance shouldn't be an issue in either direction. And because we're channeling everything to one driveway, 124-foot wide driveway, it's wide enough for two cars to pass each other. So there's no issues internally, but also that there's only one spot for people to exit in and out of this site.
Sure.
And so that's kind of why we did it this way. We didn't want to have an additional entrance, for the 8 units. So kind of how we looked at it.
Sure. No, it makes sense. I mean, if you're going to get 8 units on it, that's probably that's the best way I can see right now. If you could
also push the driveway all the way to that side of the lot too, we thought that was the better, instead of having to come to the left-hand side of that lot.
If you could make it a little bit closer to 90 degrees, that would be awesome. But it looks kind of tight. All right. Do you have anything more to say about this, Mr. Fliss, before we discuss it in the board?
Nope.
All right. I'll open it up for discussion then amongst the board members.
Mr. Chair, I had a couple of quick comments. One was relative to stormwater and best management practices. I noticed it appears in one of the detention basins, there's a proposed gate valve. I know in the past we've had different discussions about gate valves and drainage of detention basins, and also the monitoring wells that are required for some basins. And I figured we'd just flush those issues out and give them some direction in terms of if we would approve those waivers.
Okay, sure. So waiver letter. So I'm looking at the checklist and it says waiver letter is not submitted.
Well, and I don't know.
We weren't looking for waivers.
I
And
think
so-
Mr. Oh, go ahead, Wes.
So, with regards to the gate valve, and it's funny because a lot of the stuff we've done, the way we design it is based on the previous review that you had when Ross Associates used to review. And so a lot of the stuff we designed was to them. Now that we work with Graves for the last couple projects, we're starting to move toward what they prefer with regards to now the gate valve. A lot of times we put in there to close after construction is completed. And to allow the basin to empty on its own and only open the gate valve during when you need to empty the basin if there's an issue with the basin. Now, I don't know if the board has done something different recently. And again, we have no problem making the adjustment to how if the board's changing their stance and how they like to have the basin design.
Well, just going off memory of Brightview project, we decided not to have the drainage, the drain and the valve in there because in my opinion, it just provides a path for the water to be able to circumvent the detention basin. I'd rather not have that avenue there, from my opinion. And I'm not sure if you were planning on having any monitoring wells in the detention basins, but I know that's another issue that's come up as part of the stormwater conversation.
Right, because it is required by the Stormwater Handbook, and we have waived that in the past, but you would have to request that waiver.
I think the board on both Bright Farms and the earth removal project on Mass Ave waived the requirement for the monitoring well. And on Bright Farms, they actually waived, but through insistence that the gate valve be removed to prevent a failure point. And sort of to piggyback on that, I also see that you have the wick in the base of the basin. And that had been an item that came up for discussion during the water district project. And there was concern raised that that might create a direct hydrologic connection between the bottom of the basin and groundwater. So I expect Jeff will comment on that as well.
Yeah, so typically what we've been doing with, I think what the resolve for that, and I came up on something else that they had reviewed, and I can't think of, it might have been the Whalen Park stuff just recently. We typically do sand instead of stone there.
Okay.
And so we can, obviously we'll wait to make that change. But I think that's something that we've been kind of making that, that's kind of how we solve that issue. That I know Jeff has a difference of opinion on the stone. And so I think typically what we do is like a septic sand there instead. And so I think that's typically how we handle that with regards to the wick drain. The reason we like the wick drain is for late winter, early spring, where the ground obviously is frozen, but this kind of creates that connection for the water to leave the basin in a detention standpoint. And as I stated, the thing we like to have the valve in is, like I said, once the construction is completed and the basin's acting in a typical fashion, not a sediment basin, we close the valve. And really the wick drain is to help facilitate groundwater recharge, especially during those frozen conditions. In a normal condition, the basin's going to allow, the bottom of the basin will allow as much as they can. But that's how we like to have it. And again, if there's an issue of standing water in the basin for too much time, then we will go in and you can open the valve and allow for the cleaning of the basin at that point to basically dry the bottom of the basin. And so that's why we like to have that wick drain in the valve that way. It's more of a maintenance issue down the road more than anything. The valve is. And so that's, I think, hopefully it's takes care of. I know, Tanner, you mentioned that you don't like to have the drain because it creates the positive outflow. And that's why we put the valve in, not to have that positive outflow all the time. So it's kind of how we, I think, meet everybody's intent of the basin in that Wick Drain.
Okay, so one of my concerns is when you break virgin ground and you install a pipe, you typically have pipe bedding around it that will create a potential path for flow. Was there the collars proposed on that?
It's a clay barrier around the berm. And so if you look at our details, we show an impervious core detail.
Yep.
So the basin will have a clay barrier. So that pipe will go through the clay barrier. Which it should stop the flow there.
Okay, so it won't be bedded in sand. It'll be bedded in clay when it goes through.
Not through the berm.
Okay.
Through the berm, it'll be clay. And so I think it's on sheet 6 of 6 are the details for the wick drain, and then the impervious core detail.
Yep, I see it. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Well, considering we don't have the peer review, we probably shouldn't get too deep into the weeds with the engineering. But we can.
Well, I guess the question, the questions, I guess, would just, if the board had any questions in regards to the site itself, parking, driveways, siting of the buildings, if there's any questions about that, just make sure that we provided enough for the architecture part of it too. That in the past, the board has made sure that they like to see what the building's going to look like. We just make sure they provided enough information in regards to that. We do show landscaping around the units and even along Mass Ave, and just to make sure some of those items that might not come up in a peer review, but you typically come from the board members, to make sure that if anybody has any questions like that,
Sure, appreciate it. And I also appreciate you started off with the architectural elevations, which was checked off, not included. So that's good.
Yeah, something that we get later on in the process. I know they were working on them, so we didn't have them in the initial submittal, but we knew that the board would want to see those. So
Excellent. Well, you've done due diligence. Appreciate that. I'm disappointed by the density, but you got it in there, and I don't see any major issues with it. Aside from what I've already mentioned about the busy road and the angle of the approach, and the cold water fishery. You're aware of all that. So anybody else have anything to mention, comment?
I had just one quick comment in terms of screening. Clearly, the project is very close to the property line for, I believe it's 733 Mass Ave, the house that they're currently renovating. And just out of respect for all of the work that they've done there and the close proximity to these units, personally, I'd like to see some sort of screening along that portion of the project, especially where the vehicles will be exiting and turning onto the driveway, where you could see there's a potential for those headlights to be shining right into the back of the house at 733.
Yep. So if you see, and I think Adam's, Adam, he is right there. We do show a proposed evergreen landscape screening right in that, I think that same area that you're talking about there, when people would turn out of their parking spaces or the garages and come down the main driveway. And so that's where we did propose that, so they're not coming into the back of that property of 733. The rest of that strip would be a little tougher to landscape, because we do propose a rip-rap swale along that, or rip-rap slope there along that strip. So it'd be a little tougher to landscape, but there is around a 6 to 7 foot drop from 733 into this property.
Okay.
So any headlights lower on that driveway will be below their property. So
Yeah, and
that's
I'm
why we
at it.
that's why we
From,
landscaped it the way we did. As you get, like I said, further down to the main part of the driveway where all the units are connected, at that point, there is a 6 to 7 foot drop right in. Yeah, you can see there's our 543 proposed and 550 up near the property line. So there's a fair drop there.
okay.
So there should be a natural buffer there. And like I said, anything above that where there isn't that buffer of elevation, we do propose some screening there. So.
Excellent.
Oh, I just come up with another question, Wes. How are you mitigating flow from the driveway into the Mass Ave? By grades?
Yes. Yeah. So we have I'm just trying to see what we have here for spot grades. The plan's so busy, some of it's tough to see. But yes, that's what we were trying to do. Sheet the majority of the driveway off into the swale that in front of the property. And there is going to be a small amount that will go out to the street, but majority of it gets caught and sheeted off to the swale that runs in the front. And it's something that we'll have to take a look at too with the DPW and see if they make sure they're okay with that. And they're comfortable with it. But I know, I believe Rob already submitted some comments to Adam. And I think his biggest concern had to do more about the sewer.
Well, the driveway is going to be Mass DOT because that's DOT's road. So you'll need an access permit through them. And you're going to have to satisfy District 3 as far as whatever water you dump out there.
And for anybody who doesn't know, Rob Oliva is our new DPW director. So when Wes refers to Rob, he's speaking to the DPW director. It's not Jack anymore, just an update. This is fairly recent news. Did you mention a box culvert when you in your first introduction?
Yeah, there's an existing box culvert further down in the left-hand corner. There's right there. So that's where all the stormwater goes.
Well, that's where the cold water fishery is.
Yep.
So when it crosses the property line, that's where you're not supposed to increase the off-site flows, right?
Correct.
Okay. So it's going to be localized, but equal or less.
Yes. And then I'm actually trying to look at it now. So we actually looked at it as the edge of the wetlands as our design point.
Okay, that'll give a little bit dispersal.
Yeah. We wanted to make sure we weren't negatively impacting the wetlands when we did our design.
All right, but this is still got to get fleshed out through conservation anyway, so.
Correct. Yeah. Like I said, we will, we're already in the process of putting that together. We know that we have to get permits from them and you guys, and then obviously, I think, we talked about with Paula earlier about making sure the building inspector, if we have to go back with the ZBA and update our permit with them.
Very good.
So I know Adam, when we spoke with Adam before, I think we were thinking probably second meeting in June. Adam, is that probably? I know you had
I did talk to Jamie today. He didn't really give an indication. He said that he'd leave it up to you. Second meeting in June, you definitely have comments back by then.
Well, that's what we're hoping, because hopefully we'll have the comments back by the end of this a couple weeks maybe, and then we can work it out through the month of June and have everything hopefully more wrapped up by the time we come back with regards to the peer review, and then also give us some time to work with the Conservation Commission. And we may not obviously have approval with the Conservation Commission, but at least have a better idea from them.
Yeah, where they're at.
Correct.
So the second meeting would be 28 June.
And I think what Graz is the only one that asked to be on that meeting so far.
So far, yes.
Yes. Okay. At this point, obviously we're good. I don't know if we need to ask for an official continuation or if,
Yeah, the board would need to continue it.
and what was the date of that meeting?
June 28th.
So we would respectfully request a continuation to June 28th, 2021 for this public hearing. And then hopefully in the meantime, we can have most of the issues worked out with the peer reviewers and have some of the Conservation Commission worked out too at the same time.
Sounds like a good plan.
Agreeable to the planning board.
Yeah, so I guess we just need a motion to continue to that.
I would make a motion to continue this hearing for 711 Massachusetts Avenue to June 28th at 6:35.
I'd second.
Excellent. Any further discussion about the continuance? Okay, all in favor, roll call vote. Mr. Brenner,
Aye.
Mrs. Bertram,
Aye.
Mr. Cole,
Aye.
and an aye for myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
The information. Best
good
of
night.
luck. You as well.
Thank you.
All right, that wraps up our public hearings for this evening. I think Mr. Bittner are you with us, Mr. Bittner? I think you asked something about a procedural thing and I didn't ask.
No, you answered all my questions throughout the meeting, so it's fine.
Okay. So the other
Thank you.
one.
I am still here though.
Okay, very good. The other one was for, you wanted something else, didn't you? No? Okay.
Pardon me?
I thought you wanted to speak up about something else further on the agenda.
Not at the moment.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
That was in regards to 101 Pleasant Street. All my questions were answered.
Okay, very good. So we are up to minutes approval. We have two sets, public hearing and non. I reviewed the public hearing and signed my Mullen rule form. So I guess I would be looking for a motion to approve the minutes.
I would motion to approve minutes for the planning board meeting and for the public hearing from April 26, 2021.
Excellent. Paula seconded. Any discussion about approval of minutes? Roll call vote. Everybody in favor? Mr. Brenner?
Aye.
Mrs. Bertram?
Aye.
Mr. Cole?
Aye.
And an aye for myself, even though I wasn't there. Nice. So now we're on to committee reports. Stormwater Task Force. I believe we're scheduled to meet next week. Is that correct, Adam?
That's correct.
Okay.
No, 2 weeks, the 22nd.
2 weeks? Okay. The Agricultural Commission will be meeting next Thursday. And TCP Building Design Committee, I think we've got a meeting this week or next week. I'm not sure, but there's no reports for those. So the next one is Open Space.
We have not met.
Capital Planning, are they done yet?
We are, no report right now.
So do you have any meetings scheduled for the near future? Or I think you should be done for the year, right?
Yeah, we had made the change to make the recommendation to increase the amount for a capital project. We made that recommendation, so we may be meeting at some point after we talk with finance, but I don't have a date yet.
Okay, very good. Thank you. The Economic Development Committee.
We did not meet in May. We will meet again in early June.
Okay, and Paula is our representative there, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the MRPC, the Regional Planning Commission.
I have a few things from there, nothing terribly large, but MRPC's offices have reopened somewhat to in-person, and they'll be fully reopening on June 12th. So that's just an FYI for anyone who may interact with them in person. You've heard me speak about the retirement issues faced by MRPC and other regional planning boards due to the state enforcing some methods of collecting retirement funds they hadn't actually done prior. And the short answer to that is that legislation to kind of fix that oversight and make it so all the regional planning boards in Massachusetts don't go broke overnight. That legislation is in the process of being filed, but that's expected to be a 4 to 5 year process. So we are now in the hurry up and wait section.
Fair enough. I'm sorry. Are they still meeting at the Doyle Center?
I do not know. So they have not said that the MRPC will be that the meetings will be reopening, rather that the office will be.
Okay.
Is back up and running. I don't know if MRPC, they have not spoken about resuming in-person meetings for the group, for the various planning board members and everything else.
Okay. But they are out of the Doyle Center now.
I have absolutely no idea. So
Yes,
Okay.
they are.
Very good.
Thank you. As long as I've been on this board, everything has been remote.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel for you. Much fun.
The only other thing is the Lunenburg Conservation Lands mapping. Is the town is now collecting edits to the trail locations from the public, and then they'll send that on to the MRPC GIS staff when the time comes.
So was that from the Joint Transportation Committee or the MRPC?
MRPC reported that.
Okay.
Joint Transportation Committee is up. Next meeting is upcoming this week or next. I have to look at my calendar.
Very good. Well, that rounds out our committee reports. So now we're on to our workshop section, Master Plan RFP. Take it away, Adam. Oh, you're muted.
I might suggest we do director's items. We do have a member of the public here who is interested in one of those items, and it is getting later. I imagine there'll be a fair amount of discussion about the RFP, so I would put that to your discretion.
Sure, we can go with whatever you like.
All right, so town meeting follow-up. We'll go in reverse order. So the parking bylaw did pass at town meeting. Thank you for everyone who was there. The restoration of the 1.5 times lot size for 2-family dwellings did not pass. Mr. Mackey, who is here in attendance this evening, raised a valid point and concern in that there is a housing crisis, and he was concerned that adding the additional land to the requirement for 2 families would create a hardship in creating housing within the town. Additionally, he made a proposal on town meeting floor to alter the definition of 2-family. Currently, our definition speaks to a side-by-side 2-family, and he was looking to, and it was difficult to visualize. I don't know if his definition required that 2 families be what I would call up and down, where they're 2-story and the first floor is 1 unit, second floor is another unit, or if it just permitted either side by side or up and down. And I don't know if you want to turn the floor over to him to explain his amendment and his stance. What I heard at town meeting on the floor was that there was some support from members of other boards and the public for this amendment, but they were looking for Mr. Mackey to bring that to this board and have this board review and vet and make their recommendation and or counter proposal to that modification.
Excellent. Well, I am very pleased to have Mr. Mackey here at our planning board meeting instead of being a troublemaker at town meeting.
I was going to start off with that, so you took my line. We're going to get at the start of the process, not the end of the process.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much. Please let us know what you have to say about it.
Okay, so the proposal was to answer Adam's question. Up and down, basically. Currently, it's not possible, according to the bylaw, to build a two-family dwelling with adjoining floors. You require adjoining walls, which the specific use case is for handicapped or senior housing that really isn't suited to these duplexes that are being built all over the place because of the stairs. So I've got a situation with, people in my family who are in their 80s, and they're going to be needing a single family unit. And I'm sure I'm not alone. This is a shortage of this type of housing. So what I'm proposing, the problem, let me describe the problem first. So if you take a modest house, about 1,300 square feet, 1 or 2 bedrooms, that generally is about maybe a 26 by 48 envelope for the house, and then next to it a garage, so there's no shoveling or cleaning off of a car, and that would generally, if it's a 2-car garage, you'd be looking at another 24 feet minimum. So that's 72 feet. Under the current bylaw, to build 2 of those in a duplex to gain the efficiencies of the lot, keep the whole price down, you're at 144 feet long. And I did notice that's it's actually longer than the proposed frontage of the Colonial Subaru dealership. It's a massive footprint. And I think from an environmental perspective, not just a cost perspective, when you're talking about doubling the non-permeable roof foundation, you're disturbing a lot more of the site, literally double the site. And the costs of the excavation, the foundation forms, the floor, the roof structure is doubled, the roof insulation is doubled, and the roofing material and all that associated labor is doubled. So, in looking at some of these price estimates, today you're around $60,000 in additional costs, plus the environmental costs of requiring this particular structure. So the proposal was to allow up and down, essentially 1 unit at ground level, with a garage on the side, and then a single outside door, so it looks like the other houses in the neighborhood rather than look like a duplex. So the outside door would lead to a shared foyer, and it's just a stairwell. So the single unit would be able to walk directly into their unit, or perhaps use a wheelchair to get into that unit. And then the residents upstairs, presumably more able-bodied, would be able to go up that stairwell and access their unit. I'm proposing, in my particular case, I'd probably put the garage under. So for the second unit, the garage would be under. So the entire unit would fit into a 72 by 26 box, essentially. And it's not ideal. I mean, from a marketing perspective, having people over each other is not perfect, but for people of modest means, this gives them the flexibility to build a two-family, have a separate entrance, meet those requirements. And I think just support seniors and disabled folks that, I'm not a professional developer, clearly. And it's just something that I would like to do.
Well, I want to express my appreciation for coming to the board and expressing your ideas rather than just blurting it out at town meeting floor. But I don't understand why you would have naysayed us fixing a grammatical correction just because you had a different idea. I mean, I think this would be a simple thing of just eliminating the verbiage that restricts having them up and down instead of side by side. And I wouldn't be against that at all.
Well, as far as the area, going from 2 acres to 3 acres or 1 to 1.5, if you look at the land around the town, once the zoning came in for 1 and 2 acres, all of the property owners subsequently went with that guidance. They've split up all the properties along those lines. So there's 1 acre lots in the 1 acre zoning, and there's 2 acre lots in the 2 acre zoning. And so to find a lot that's just naturally going to have the 3 acres available or the 1.5 is going to make that difficult to find, which obviously constricts supply, but then also increases the cost. I mean, you might have to take 2 lots, two 1 acre lots, and combine them to do a 2-family. It just, and then going to the other towns. I mean, even 2 acres for a 2-family dwelling is quite significant.
I certainly can appreciate that, but so what you're talking about is taking a single family on a minimum size lot and then converting it to a 2-family and making that okay. But as you described, the definition of 2-family that we currently have on the books and we have to keep and use until it gets changed doesn't apply to that anymore. So we're open to a lot of stuff that's not necessarily good until it gets fixed.
So I had called Adam about this article because I was concerned because I think it's overly restrictive, and I share Mr. Mackey's concerns about the lot size. And honestly, I had missed it in the years that I've been on this board. I think that as as parents age, more and more people are taking care of elderly parents, and the definition of 2-family, the way it's currently written in our bylaw, would eliminate accessory housing unless you had 1.5 times the lot area. And to me, that's an unreasonable burden. As someone who has taken care of 2 sets of parents, both my husband's and mine, it's more and more common. And I know many people in my neighborhood that are taking care of parents. And I don't know that as a board, that's something that we want to prevent. So I have a problem with the bylaw, the way that it's currently written, period. And I would like us to really take a look at that, because I think that, we need to be more flexible. And we did that in the village district, but simply because people are outside of that district, to make them have 1.5 times the lot area of a single family home, it eliminates the possibility of them doing an accessory apartment in their home. And I don't know if that was ever our intent.
I don't agree with that, Paul, because we don't have an area requirement, a lot requirement for an accessory dwelling.
We do actually, because I asked Adam this. I said, so, okay, Adam, go ahead. So clarify.
So we have a separate definition of accessory dwelling unit. Accessory dwelling unit is allowed by right anywhere that you have a primary dwelling unit. It's allowed under certain circumstances and certain sizes. So you can't build 2 1,300 square foot units and call one accessory. It needs to be clearly subservient to the primary dwelling, and you have to have a minimum 1,200 square foot primary dwelling. So if you have a 1,500 square foot house and you build an accessory dwelling unit, it has to be a minimum of 500 square feet to have a minimum of 100 square feet for every bedroom over one. And at the end of when you've designed both units, the combination of two, the gross, the accessory dwelling unit has to be no more than 30% of the gross floor area of all the living space.
Right. Okay.
So you can have accessory dwelling units. They are not restricted to blood relatives. They're not restricted to family members. They're not restricted to anything. They're just accessory dwelling units. You can rent them. You can stick your parents in them. You can move into them, and you can let your children live in the primary dwelling. The only condition is that the owner of the property needs to occupy one of the two units. So there is, and this was a change that was made when the use table went in. You are even permitted to build a separate dwelling building. So you can build what on the West Coast they call a casita. You could build you could have your own Cato Kaling. You can build a pool house that is 30% or less of the gross floor area and someone can live in. So this was something that the planning board consciously did at the time that they created the use table in order to facilitate just this type of case where someone has an elderly relative or a child or children who are returning from college and want to stay in town, but know that they can't afford rent at Emerald Place or to buy their own house at the time, but they want to give them the opportunity to have a living space of their own. And that is to say that there isn't things that can be done to improve the two-family dwelling. It's just that we do currently make provisions for accessory dwelling.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, I just had a
Yep.
quick question. Now, how does this relate to a true in-law? In other words, an accessory dwelling, as I understand it, is a standalone structure, which really doesn't speak much to Mr. Mackey's point. But we do have provisions where you can have an in-law, but my understanding is it has to have free access to the main part of the structure, correct?
No, that doesn't exist anymore. The accessory dwelling unit took that. And I think that what we're speaking of speaks directly to what Mr. Mackey's talking about. He's talking about two separate housekeeping units. Now, you can include the accessory apartment within the bounds of the existing dwelling unit. There's nothing that says that you can't do that. There are a multitude of options for the accessory dwelling unit. And the idea was to be flexible and allow folks to maximize the ability to provide alternative small dwellings in conjunction with their primary residence. So with the interplay, it gets very hard.
Yeah. So the concept of the quote unquote in-law doesn't really apply. When we did the use table, that all became accessories. So at this point, it doesn't matter what the legal quote unquote separation is between the units. They can be standalone in the same structure.
Correct. And I think
those requirements, and all of this would be subject to, they could apply for variances. So if you're on a non-conforming lot, so you bought the 2-acre lot and you've got your 1,500 square foot house and you want to put a second floor on and so on, you could conceivably apply for.
You could go for dimensional relief through the zoning board.
Okay.
And I think what you're talking about, Mr. Cole, the open access in-law apartment, I mean, you can do that by right in really almost any community, because if they're not a separate dwelling unit, I mean, I grew up in a community where it wasn't uncommon for people to have a summer kitchen in the basement. And so, I mean, you could have 3, 4, 8 kitchens in your house if you wanted to. There's nothing in the building code that says you can't do that. What with zoning, it comes down to how the dwelling unit is separated. And if you built, your parents a basement unit, but there was no separate access and egress, and there was no standalone ability for them to close that off, it's not really an apartment. It's just a separate living space. So, I mean, you get into a lot of nuance and it's really kind of a judgment call for the inspector, but I think that was a way previously where we didn't have any zoning in place for accessory dwelling units, that the building inspector sort of worked with people to allow them to provide care in a way that fell legally within zoning, but wasn't going the full boat of a full separate dwelling unit.
Okay. Well, that's very helpful information. I just feel like this is a situation that I equated a lot to earth removal and some of the other topics we've discussed in the last couple of years, where there seems to be a little bit of misinformation, and some of that just from the bylaw changes and people not having a complete understanding of all the little nuances that are built into it. But essentially, if somebody wants to take care of their aging parents in their home, they do have some options. It's not as though the bylaw completely eliminates their ability to address that need.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Bittner and Mr. Mackey both have their hands up, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I'm not sure why Greg does, but we'll go back to Mr. Mackey and see, follow up, make sure that we've touched upon.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understood the 30% requirement in the, what I calculate as 600 feet bare minimum for the housing. So that would mean that the primary unit would have to be 2,000 square feet, and then the accessory would be 600. Is that correct for the smallest thing?
No, you could have, it would be 500 because you can have a 1 bedroom at 500, and anything over 1 bedroom, you add 100 square feet for each bedroom.
Okay, but it can't be more than 30%
of the total square footage.
Right. So to get, 600 square feet is just frankly too small. It needs to be around 1,200 square feet for 2 people to live there comfortably, I think. So you'd be looking at like a 3,000 square foot regular house, and then another 1,000. I mean, that would be like a 4,000.
I mean, at 2,000, at 1,200 square feet, you're probably close to 2,000. Yes. It's 2,000 plus 1,200 is 3,200 times 0.3 is 960. So yeah, I mean, you're up in the 2,300 square foot house range for 1,200 square feet.
And that would be set up with an upper floor and a lower floor.
It'd be set up however you wanted it to be set up. The accessory apartment gives you a lot of flexibility. You could build them their own separate dwelling building if that was what made sense on the lot and whatnot.
That could be rented.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That could be rented once the parent.
Yes, it could.
Passes.
Yep. One owner occupant.
As long as the owner occupies 1 unit on the property, whichever unit they choose.
I see.
And the challenge with all of this, depending on where your property is located, is disposal of human waste. Getting a septic system that's going to carry the number of bedrooms you have in each unit. And if you have a single family with 4 bedrooms and you want to turn it into a 2-family, unless you're turning it into 2-bedroom units, you're looking at ensuring that you can create a compliant system for 6 bedrooms. And the same thing with an accessory apartment. You need to be able to provide a space where you can adequately locate a Title V compliant system.
Right. Yeah, thankfully, the lot I have has perked well. So the issue, I mean, I'm looking to build something small. So it'd be a 2-bedroom over a 1-bedroom. And I don't, I would prefer the flexibility of having the 2-family and changing that definition to allow the connection by the floor with the private entrance. You know, not having that in the bylaw and not having this this extra land requirement doesn't seem to have had any negative effect on the town and what's being built. And even if it was restricted to new, but honestly, I think just to help the townspeople, giving them that flexibility, you know, a new 2-family would make sense under this bylaw, and maybe to address the concerns of the chairman, you know, that you couldn't convert an existing house to a 2-family. You'd have to use the accessory unit approach for that.
No, I'm not saying you'd have to do either one. If you chose to, then you could go by the bylaw and just conform to the requirements. And I don't, it seems to me like you're trying to manipulate our bylaws to suit one resident. And that's not what bylaws are for. They're to protect all the residents. I can appreciate your situation. I really can. I spent a good amount of my life in college in 500 square feet, and I shared it with my dad sometimes. It worked. It's, you know, but at the same time, I grew up on 100 acres. So some people say that I'm land rich and spoiled and against people with small properties. I'm not. I'm just against people developing their property next to somebody else with their property and impacting them negatively. I think that we cleared it up for you tonight, Dave, that you didn't need to jump up and down about us fixing what we had inadvertently messed up. But and again, I don't mean to chastise you at all. I appreciate you coming to our meeting. I'd like to have you at more if you have more concerns and questions, and hopefully we can explain to you why certain things are the way they are, instead of saying things at town meeting and giving the wrong impression, because that's oftentimes what happens. I appreciate it.
So is that a denial of requesting to change this?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. No, I think, in fact, we had somebody else come here recently. It was a previous member, Damon McQuaid, came to ask us to consider doing open front porches that could be within the required setback, which is fine. We haven't seen anything formal as far as I know. It would be nice if you formalized something so that we had an idea of what your ideas were and what your concept was and how it might modify or where it might fit in. But, you know, it's always good to come and talk to us first. But, you know, you're more than welcome to submit whatever you like to the land use director, and he'll put it on our agenda.
Okay. I did email it to Mr. Brenner earlier this week. And of course, I had made the proposal, which I think there's a copy of at the town meeting, the exact language that I was looking for.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Mackey did email me earlier this week. I haven't had the chance to respond to him yet. But it was, it doesn't have a proposal. It doesn't have a formal proposal attached, but it was the same things we've talked about here. And I was going to bring up, if he were not here, to have the discussion himself. I am interested in seeing this idea fleshed out, because I grew up in a town with several of this style house, and I don't know where you have the two true units, not just an accessory dwelling unit in the stacked fashion. I don't know that I see an issue with it, but I don't know that I love the idea either. But I would love to see a proposal so we could actually discuss it on what that would look like for the town.
And quite frankly, I like the idea. I don't like the fact that our bylaw restricts people, that says you have to have side by side and you can't do a 2-family up and down. It's just stupid. I think that that's overregulation. Perfect example of it. What difference does it make to anybody? I don't understand. If anybody can explain it to me, what difference does it make if they're side by side or up and down? Anybody?
Yeah, it makes it a lot more expensive.
Well, there you go. There's a lot of stuff like that going on. Regulate it so it costs everybody more, so that the corporations make out and the little guy gets,
So
Yeah.
then why can't we change it?
We can talk about it. And if everybody agrees to, then we can bring it to town meeting. And then if somebody doesn't stand up and say, no, that's a bad idea, and freak everybody out, then it might get passed. That's how town government works.
Mr. Chair, I just had a comment that doesn't really speak specifically to this change, but I think part of the challenge with any of our bylaws is that we're trying to develop regulations that work for every scenario, and it's impossible. I mean, every property is a little bit different. Every use is a little bit different. Things that concern one resident aren't a concern to another resident. But in general, I'm uncomfortable with encouraging more density, and whether that's a townhouse, condos, apartment buildings, because my concern is the impact on the town as a government and its services. Anytime you develop uses like apartments or multifamily condos, the turnover rate tends to be higher for those type of uses than standalone single family dwellings. And what that speaks to is the burden on the school system. Residential uses pay in about 60 to 70% of their expenses and taxes. So for every unit of housing we add, it's costing the town money. And the only way to offset that is uses like Unitil's new building on Electric Ave or Whalum Wash or a gas station. That's really the only way the town's able to balance the budget. And a side note to that is I've heard and had many more residents come up to me concerned about the rate of development and the density of development than I have about being able to develop their particular property from a single family to a 2-family, or the square footage of their lot didn't work, or things along those lines. And I'm by no means opposed to making this change. I mean, if we support a 2-family side by side, I agree with Mr. Mackey that it doesn't make a lot of sense to require that those units are only side by side, that you can't do them up and down. But I would just be cautious about how we approach things in a way to make sure that we don't put more of a burden on the town, especially as it relates to the schools, because that's a huge part of our budget, and the residential uses really don't pay for themselves.
No, they don't.
No.
Oh, no. And I was born here. I've been here almost 50 years, and the town has doubled in size, doubled in population. And I'm against the density as well. The density only brings all kinds of bad things. It pushes up our safe harbor, leaves us open to 40Bs, which is even more dense, and it's less regulated. The comprehensive permit skips pretty much everybody, goes through ZBA, and they're not equipped to handle a housing development like that. And that's just plain fact. This is planning board where we deal with development and stuff like that. And I have so many problems with this town. I love this town. I love the people, but it's backwards in so many ways. The bylaws suck. Point blank. They do. They were put together at the whim of pretty much one person who controlled planning board, and they are getting fixed slow but sure. We can't do them all at once. It's piecemeal, and we just need to explain why this is a good thing for the town in general. And almost always we're going to have a few people that it's not good for, and it's their right and their privilege to speak up. But it's our obligation to say that, well, we understand you, we hear you, but it's not just about you. It's about 12,000 other people. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that need to get fixed, and we can't do them all in one day, and we certainly can't do them if everybody naysays everything at town meeting.
If I may, just want to point out that putting them vertically instead of horizontally doesn't change the density at all.
All right. Mr. Bittner has had his hand up for a very long time. We're talking about something that's not on our agenda aside from follow-up from town meeting. So I will ask Mr. Bittner very quickly, what it is that you have to say about this. Please.
Basically, you and Tanner both made most of my points regarding the density. Again, I was a member of the board at the time. We made the use table. We were very careful to make sure that people could take care of aging parents and things of that nature with the accessory dwelling. And again, I just don't want to open it up to be exploited and create more problems and unintended consequences. So that's it.
Thank you for your brevity. And Ms. Adams.
I'll keep it brief. I, number one, sympathize with the board. It's not easy to balance all of the requirements and all of the needs. I applaud you for having a specific accessory unit bylaw, because I think that's where Mr. Mackey's proposal lies. It isn't great to have a 500 square foot unit, but I know that DHCD for affordable units allows them to go as low as 250. I know because I worked on projects that were that small. So you can make it work. It isn't what somebody may want, but it's still a dwelling unit that serves its purpose. I think two family, and that discussion should be discussed if you want to make changes to that whole definition, but I think it's separate and distinct from the accessory use, which is more suited to the kind of specific proposal Mr. Mackey has, which is taking care of aged relatives. Now, I know that it can be open to anybody, including renters, but I think two family is a different animal altogether.
I agree, because there is no 50% maximum. They can be 2,000. Anyways, we're talking about something that was not on our agenda. I appreciate the input, Mr. Mackey, and I hope that when it does get on our agenda, you can join us.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Certainly, and you'll be afforded that anytime you have something to say here. Now, Adam, our meeting schedule, we've got two hearings on the 28th and one hearing on the 14th. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so what do we have on the 24th besides the Holman Street?
I don't think we have anything.
Would you have one that's better than another to have this on the agenda so we can have a conversation?
No, I mean, if Mr. Mackey's available on the 24th, I think that'd be probably a good time.
Okay.
Sure.
Does that work for you, Mr. Mackey?
It does.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing this to our attention, and thank you for your patience with my lack of patience sometimes.
Okay.
All right. So, Adam, you
Yes.
brought us down that rabbit hole.
Well, it was part of town meeting follow-up.
Okay.
So if you want to bump back to the RFP, that's good.
Does that work for you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I finished the RFP as we had talked about, and And I sent it around to the board, and I also sent it to the assistant town manager, who informed me that because the project is not $50,000 currently, it can't be an RFP. It can be an IFB, which is an invitation for bid. Difference being RFP, you can do a qualitative RFB where it's a blended experience and price, and you can kind of choose your own person, your own firm. With the IFB, we have to take the lowest priced qualified bidder. The twist on that being, we can make the qualifications whatever we want. So, and I have not gone back and made any amendments to the document because I got this information at 2:45 today. So what we have here is, sort of the back end of it, you probably don't really need to care about. Anything tax compliant, non-collusion, that's all standard paperwork. What we would be looking at is, the background and purpose are really, why are we doing this? The scope of services, and then the deliverables and the selection criteria. So selection criteria is where we would be probably making the biggest change, and that's where we would be putting together what makes a qualified bidder. And we would be getting away from highly advantageous, not advantageous, and unacceptable, and saying the bidders have to have, and then listing out those criteria. They need to have 20 years of planning experience. They need to have done a master plan for a farming community at least 3 times. And I mean, that's just random examples, but the board would want to really dial in and think about what they want from a firm. We would list that, and then only firms that hit that criteria would be eligible to have us look at their prices.
You call this a farming community. I think there's going to be some people upset with that.
Well, don't we have some farms?
There's going to be a lot of people that are happy with that, but yeah.
We are. We're a rural farming bedroom community. There's no way around it.
With density issues.
Well, everybody has density issues. Some are more dense than others.
So I understand that we need to go back and change the qualification part of the document, but I had some comments on other parts of the document, and I don't know if you do those now or if you want to wait or.
No, I would rather go through anything that you have comments on now. And if you folks want to put, let's do that, and then we can look at, I don't expect anyone's going to be ready to change the selection criteria or qualifications right now. But if everybody thinks about that, submit stuff, we can do that on the 24th and try and get this out sooner rather than later.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Paula, but I want to back up a little bit and ask, first of all, I want to clarify. What I recall, the MRPC's estimate was $6,000 or $7,000.
$36,000.
36,000. Okay. So that gets rid of that question. The other question is, I know that I personally responded to Adam's email, and I don't know what the impetus was to actually go out to RFP. Was that a board? Did we come to that decision together?
I think both Tanner and myself, and Tanner can chime in himself, but I was shocked to hear at one of our meetings that we were in the process of signing a contract with MRPC, because we had talked about master planning on numerous occasions, and we had talked about scope of services, and Adam had solicited sample RFPs. So quite frankly, I was stunned when Adam said he was in the process of finalizing a contract, because I don't remember us ever deciding to go with MRPC. I know we had talked about it at one point, and they had done the economic development component for us, which we've never really flushed out. But speaking for myself, I expressed my shock, and I think Tanner did too. But Tanner, you chime in.
Yeah, that was basically my recollection as well. And I think what happened was we started flushing out the RFP process and looking at that, but ultimately came to the decision that it was all driven on the population data. So we switched gears, did the population study, and then probably a month or so ago, I brought up the fact that we haven't done much with the master planning. And I think Adam was just trying to get a jump on things and move things in a positive direction, which I appreciate. But I also want to make sure that whoever we select for the process is someone that's going to deliver a product that we're happy with. So.
Well, and the other part of my issue is I think we need to do this regardless of who we end up going with, is really flush out what it is that we're looking for and what the deliverables are. And we'd never had that conversation. So I think that is this part of the conversation. And I did take a look at the information that we have from our MRPC, and quite frankly, it's extremely limited. It doesn't detail what it is that they're going to provide and what we're going to get as an end result for this $36,000. So whether it's MRPC or whether it's some other planning consultant, I think it's important that we as a board talk about what it is that we're asking them to do and what it is that we expect that for them to provide.
Well, I thank you both for that clarification. That's pretty much what I recalled. And yeah, well, so to summarize what my response was to Adam was that it's nice that our master plan has something to do with two different towns, and that kind of outlines the type of product. And I like the people at MRPC and MJTC and all the regional people. I like the people. It's just the product is pretty much cooker cutty. Cook what? Yeah, you know what I meant. So and it gets back to our conversation earlier about the state and the governor, and well, I don't really care. This is our town. This is our planning board, and I don't care what the state wants to do. This is about our town, and I don't want to get mashed together with Fitchburg and Leominster like we always are, because we're nothing like Fitchburg and Leominster. And, you know, I think that especially for our master plan, which is more than 14 years out of date for being updated and is supposed to last for at least 10 years, I think that this really should be a product of ours. And whether or not we work with a firm to help us flush it out or not, we don't typically spend a lot of time working with MRPC, and it's a good thing for a lot of things, but I don't think it's good for this. And that was my comment. So I totally agree with trying to find other services or other professionals, but I don't want to neglect the fact that I think that that our town deserves something that is specific to our town and is not driven by the desires, the wants, the needs of the governor or Boston, because they don't live here. Period. This is our town and our residents that we're concerned about, that I'm concerned about, and I hope I speak for everybody. I get worked up about this stuff, specifically about regional planning. Regional planning has its uses, but I don't think master planning is it, which may have something to do with why that economic development thing or the economic, that portion didn't get looked at too heavily. But I'm glad that the brakes got applied to signing a contract. I'm disappointed that it has to be 50,000 or more to go out for RFP, but I like the input from Adam about how we can snug it up and make it more applicable. So thank you for the background. I think that was mostly from the last meeting.
Yeah, I think that's when that was all flushed out.
Okay, good. First meeting in 8 years I missed, aside from medical emergency, and wow. Anyways, I didn't mean to cut you off, Paula. I wanted to get the backstory.
No problem. So I gotta be honest, I went through it, and then I compared it to some others, and because I wanted to see more meat in what it was that we were looking for. But I didn't, after reviewing other communities, ours is pretty much, it's pretty close to what other communities have talked about. But I think it's important that in the section on public services and facilities, for example, that we talk about what studies already exist. So we outline what those are. So for example, the TCP building assessment study, the Vertex report, the TAPE study. I think we need to provide what documentation we want them to take a look at in regards to public facilities. And I think that we want to give a brief synopsis of what each of those are, because I think that's going to get us a better bid. I think if they know the level of information that we have, I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely. And I thought that in one of my drafts, there was a list of various documents, including projections. I don't know, in stitching stuff together, I must have dropped it. So would you prefer that it be in each individual section, or because the way I had it was it was just a reference to materials that we had that would be should be referenced in the development of the plan.
Whether it's done as an addendum and we just say see appendix whatever, but I think it's important because the town has spent so much money on getting all of this data that I want to make sure that all of the data gets reviewed. So I would like somewhere in the document, and it was specific to public facilities, there was that section that I think that it's really important that it be talked about what we have available. And obviously we're going to want them to take a look at the population study. So there's a lot of data that I would like to see referenced in the document. Okay. And then there were quite a few typos, and I'm not going to go through them all now, but I'll send those to you.
That would be perfect.
And somehow my comments got shut off, and I don't know how to turn them back on. Hold on a second. If somebody else wants to go, and then because I got to figure out what I did to shut them off. Did anyone else have comments about it?
Well, I certainly appreciate incorporating all the information that we already have, because I feel like as a community, we've spent quite a bit of time, money, resources in studying buildings and options. My only concern with those documents is that I don't think there's a clear path there for the consultant. And so I would just encourage us to sort through how we reconcile differences in opinion. The earlier studies, like if you go back to the TAPE, and some of the building reuse work that was done, a lot of those pointed to the fact that TCP was too big and it'd be too costly to renovate. That was, I believe, in some of the meetings that the building reuse committee did ages ago. And then TAPE references putting additions on. Well, right now we're looking at going to TCP, and I don't know how we want to flush that out.
Well, I think we
so
just,
that
right. I think you're exactly right, but I think we have to flush that out in the document, and we talk about, and I think rather than an addendum, I think it does make sense to put more context around it. And I think we need to talk about the fact that we've evaluated numerous possibilities for relocation and consolidation of town offices. We need to include the assessment of the town buildings. But I think we need to put the context, and Tanner, I completely agree with you that, we need to talk about the fact that we've had, X amount of building study committees, that we've looked at these options, that we're still in the process of studying the building. I mean, I think we need to articulate that history in this document. And I think we need to say that at this point, no conclusion has been reached as to what makes sense for the town consolidation or town offices moving forward. So I think that that's important. I think putting the information about the use of the primary annex for green space and that's going to be looked at. I think that has to be in there. I think that all of the iterations that we've gone through as a community and that we keep getting stalled, but I think we need to put that in there because I think it's important that whatever consultant we hire has that information going into this so that they know what they're up against. And I think that having that data when we do the public hearings and we do the public meetings and get public input, that they have all the background. And so they'll have that knowledge to pull from.
And I think what this all is just data. And that's how it gets interpreted as part of writing the master plan. And that's part of the board. I think that's what you're saying. And that's all part of, I think, why the consultant having it would be important. I also think we need to be careful not to look at this element of the master plan as something that will provide too much direction on the building conundrum that we have been in and are still in. This section looks at what services and facilities the town has and what services and facilities it may need based on population and service going forward. So it may touch on some of the elements that have been part of the discussion to this point, but I don't know that it's going to point us to a final place.
Well, I was. Go ahead.
Adam's doing that stumpy thing again, right? I think it's a time. I think it doesn't like going after 9:30 because that's about what last time. Sorry.
I think, but I also think it's important that we give the history and the data that, the town has been working on what to do with its aging facilities for a number of years. And there's been X amount of building study committees, and this is what came out of this one, and this is what came out of that one. Yes. I think that's important. And then when we look at the population projections and look at our school facilities, that's going to be key because, and yes. looking at what's going to happen with the elementary school, for example, with Turkey Hill, having that study, knowing what the price tag of those building envelope improvements are going to be, is going to be key in determining what makes sense for us as a community as far as a school facility. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really critical that we provide all of that background.
I think that will be really good background to provide right in the master plan that we update. Those could be appendices or at least referenced to give a timeline of our perfectly phrased conundrum for buildings and how long it's taken us to get practically nowhere.
Yep, agreed. So the other thing is I didn't understand on in deliverables, why is it that we're looking for a draft report of initial findings and we don't ever say that we're looking for a component? Because I'm looking for 2 finished components. I'm not looking for initial findings.
That's fine. I guess I looked at it as if we do these 2 components now and the board says, great, we're really chugging along. Let's go to town meeting and get more capital money to finish this thing and try and do it all at once. And if we hire consultant group A now based on price and they come back and we're pretty happy with what they do and it ends up that we are spending more than $50,000 and we do an RFP and we hire a different group based on our conclusions, or we hire the same group and they do everything else and there's other information that comes to light as they finalize the other elements, then they can go back and tidy up and finalize what we currently have and tie it into one unified document. So, it says draft. I guess I looked at it as until the entire master plan is done, everything is sort of draft.
But I think there's a big difference between a flushed out component versus initial findings. And to me, the price tag of, I can't remember, is it 43 or 46?
That's the most.
Budget is a lot of money for someone's findings. I want more than findings. And I want it to be, I would like it to be more clearly fleshed out exactly what we're going to get for that. So, and I think that part needs work. And so I was looking at other communities' RFPs and had some thoughts about that, and I can send those to you as well.
Please do.
So that's, I want to know what tangible items we're going to get at the end of this process. And then the rest were really just typos. Those were the real subject matters, is more background about where we are and where we want to go, is really the crux of my issues with the document.
Well, I just picked mine up today and haven't had a chance to look at it, so I don't have any valuable input.
I only got to give a cursory read this weekend, so I'm in a similar boat.
I had a quick question on the open space component. Can we use our open space plan for most of that component?
Yes. And it actually might knock off two of them, because the way our open space committee did the plan, it might hit a fair amount of the cultural resources section.
Well, my understanding is they had that in mind when they were preparing it, that it would be primarily the element, right? Good. Because that was.
Do we have a?
Go ahead, sorry.
Do we have an electronic version of it?
An electronic version of
the open space,
master plan.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering.
I think I might have an electronic version of the 2002 and the 2008 draft update. I don't think the 2008 ever went beyond draft, though.
Okay. My recollection is I haven't read the plan recently, but I feel like probably at least the majority, I wouldn't say it's 75%, but it's certainly more than 50% of it is still very relative today, in terms of our overall goals as a community. And so I feel like if we were able to get a consultant to help with the really complicated stuff, housing probably being one of them, and then facilities, and that we could get the vast majority of this thing pulled together without going too much further than we need to with the critical stuff.
Yeah, I mean, my experience with master planning, the public services and facilities and transportation, you absolutely need a consultant on transportation, because we don't have a transportation engineer in town, and that's some very specific engineering type stuff. Services and facilities, could we do it in-house? Yes, but when you bring a third party in, the optics of it being more objective are much cleaner, and you don't have someone who has a potential stake or a alleged stake in anything making recommendations one way or the other. Open space and whatnot we have done. Housing is really a data exercise, and then deciding how and what the town wants to do to address the data that it has. We could probably do housing in-house. So that's certainly something we can talk about.
Okay. I'm just looking to try to streamline the process and make it cost effective as possible. So that's all.
One of the things I think that we really lack is once we get a plan is implementation of the plan. And I think that that's what open space is really working towards with this plan. So for example, some of the things that we're doing, looking at land use, looking at Marshall Park and doing a master plan on Marshall Park, actually implementing some of the recommendations. And that's one area that I think is important that we flesh out better in the RFP is that we want an implementation plan, a timeline, cost estimates. So that's part of the what I would like to see in the document is really fleshing out an implementation plan and what they see as how we go about implementing the recommendations.
And I guess I didn't include that because normally that's something that covers the entire master plan. So that would be the goals and objectives section and the implementation section are the last thing you usually do in order to take out all the data, all the information, all the input that you've gotten throughout each of the elements and synthesize them into one cohesive goal and objective statement. And then implementation, what you recommend in say the two elements we're working on now, if we're only looking at those two elements, the way and the timeline that we implement them may be vastly different than if we were to look at all of the bits and pieces together. And we may say there's something in housing that's critical that we need to look at before we look at something in land use or vice versa. But without all of that information, it's hard to put together a plan that addresses all of the implementation. Again,
I understand what you're saying. And in an ideal world, we'd have the money to go out and do a whole master plan. And I wish that we did, but we don't. And unfortunately, I think because we are so limited financially, I think that to wait until the whole plan is completed, I think is going to cost us more. Because I think that we don't know when that's going to be. And then we're going to have potentially a different consultant trying to go back over the work of another consultant and come up with an implementation plan. And I don't know that that's realistic. For me, specifically with land use and with facilities, I think that there are going to be very clear defined objectives in those components. And I would hope that that's what we're going to get at the end of this is, so for example, if there are areas that should be rezoned commercial, or if there are areas that should be rezoned limited business, or, outlying recommendations are changing, we need to know that. I want to know that at the end result of this $46,000. I don't want to spend this money and not have any idea of where we're going. And then 3 years from now, try to look back over the old data and find out what the final recommendations are and how we go about implementing those. You may be right as far as a timeline or cost estimates, but I certainly think a well thought out implementation of plan is for making zoning changes or making changes to our bylaw. These are the changes we would recommend, and this is why. And this is, so that's what I expect from this process. And
that's what I would expect too. So my philosophy and what the consultant do might be different, but normally you would come up with 2 or 3 goals for each element, and those would be very nebulous things that you may or may not ever achieve. And then for each of those, you're going to bang down into objectives, and the objectives are the actionable items. And as we want to increase housing stock to diversify the population of the town would be a goal in a housing element. And then we would list zoning changes we might want to make. The creation of a housing task force to work with local nonprofits for the development of workforce housing. Those sorts of things would be the objectives. And you might never actually achieve all of the goal, but you're knocking off objectives to try and get there. So that's how I would expect each chapter to be structured.
Okay, so I don't think that we're far off. I just would like to see it more clearly defined within the document, and I'll send you some thoughts on that.
Okay.
So I noticed that Ms. Adams has had her hand up for a very long time. We don't typically take intermediate comment, but if you have something to say that's pertinent to this, it seems like you might have some experience.
Yeah, I personally wrote probably 6 elements and was involved in the development of 5 master plans. Now, granted, they were in larger communities, but the one thing that I haven't heard from this discussion, and maybe it's implicit, is a visioning process that would help you flesh out those objectives. You may already have those, and just having a workshop where you brainstorm them and see if you're all on the same page. We found, or I should say we, in my 2 previous jobs, found that was really useful for sort of meta testing where you're going, to have some public hearings, and or even if the public hearings articulated the same things that you'd written on paper, you had the community buy-in so that when the thing went to the select board or the commission or whatever, the town alderman, they weren't like, what? We haven't ever seen these. Were you up in some room somewhere concocting these? So that's sort of a process thing. The other thing is I'm very familiar with Chapter 30B, and I just looked at the state guidance. It says for projects between, I think it's 10 and 50, you should use either an IFB or an RFP. It doesn't say you can't use an RFP. In fact, you can use an RFP for projects under the limits. It just says if you hit this limit, you have to. So I was shocked to find that just because it's 36,000 or 46,000 and you haven't hit the magic number, that you can't use.
I was told by the town manager, who's our procurement officer.
Cool.
She spoke with the 30B hotline today.
Okay.
And they told her that we could not do RFP over under 50.
All right. I've done it.
With what I'm told.
But whatever.
Can we verify that, please? Can you look at what Miss Adams, she's got a lot of experience, so I'd really like to.
I'm looking at their guidebook.
I can check with 30B, but I have to, the town manager, as she is the procurement officer.
Yeah.
We can just tell her this was brought to our attention and ask her.
I don't want to muddy the water because I haven't been a town resident for a long time.
Muddy away.
But even if, and what I will say is I had a lot of experience with an invitation for bid. So if you are going that route, you find out that, all right, well, whatever, we have to do this. You can put, I would recommend that you have a submittals requirement, that everybody's got to submit these 5 things, whatever you think is important. And that you have minimum qualifications that will make the bidder responsible or non-responsive, right? And the submittal checklist, it serves 2 purposes in my estimation. One, it makes sure that you're going to get all the documents and you don't have to call them up and say, where is the whatever? And 2, it makes them pay attention. Because if they don't include X, Y, Z, you're like, oh, okay. By the same token, if it's in the best interest of the community, you can waive those submittal requirements. You can't waive something that makes them non-responsive, like missing the submittal deadline, but you can waive the fact that they forgot to include the resume of the guy that's actually going to be your contact. And the other thing you can do is reach out to some towns that are the same size and say, what was your experience? What worked? What didn't work? I know that Paula said she looked at some similar either RFPs I'd actually encourage you to look at a town's master plan that you like and take the price tag off of it. Don't look at that and say, what is it about this that I like? And is any of it relevant to Lunenburg? And if you think you've got enough in-house, that's always the best because you've got the people who know the community the best. But I do think that when all said and done, the most important part is that public buy-in, whether you do formal visioning sessions or you don't want to eat up your budget with that because you can do that, or that you have open workshops or something that you bring people in before it's signed, sealed, and delivered. It's no guarantee because obviously, as you know, you can do everything but staple it to people's foreheads and they still don't come to the meeting. But, I don't envy you. I wish I could help in the sense that I'd be happy to take minutes. I'm a minutes queen.
Thinking about moving to Lunenburg from Woburn?
It's possible that I will in the future, but not for now because my husband is based in the Woburn area. But I've done stuff remotely for my job, not because of COVID, but because of distance. So, and I'd work pro bono just for the hell of it because I enjoy it. But, that's a whole different conversation because you have extremely dedicated, highly professional, and very, very good staff, especially Adam and your board secretary. She is responsive to the max. And you don't have a lot of the stuff that I was lucky enough to have, like an IT director who would upload this stuff and come and say, what do you want me to upload? I'll take care of it. I'll manage the chat rooms and the this and the that. So you're doing a heck of a job with, less than perfect resources. So I'm prattling, so shut up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm glad I asked for the input. That was good. All right.
I do just want to add one thing. I thought Adam would say the visioning process is part of the RFP. Just so that you're aware, that is the big component is getting community participation. So.
Yeah, and we've been rather hit or miss in the past for that.
Comes with the territory.
Yeah. So, what else do we have to talk about on this?
Only any comments anyone has. And if you guys get a chance to look through it and you want to shoot an email at me end of the week, beginning of next week, I can try and put something together and have it more streamlined for the next meeting on the 24th.
Super. I do hope to be able to look at it and give you some comments. So the next meeting on the 24th is when we scheduled to have the discussion about the multifamily thing.
Yes.
Duplex.
Yep. We'll put that before this.
Probably a good idea. All right. So is that all we have for tonight on the master plan?
Unless anyone has anything else.
All right. So then back to director's items. We've covered.
I'm going to go down to the bottom and I'm going to give an update on the library detention basin. There is no O&M plan. I did go up and pull out the detention or the stormwater calcs from when it was designed and built back at the turn of the century. And there's nothing but some rainfall data and some pipe sizing. I did speak with the conservation administrator, and he said that cattails are nothing to be concerned about. They're not an invasive species. They're an aggressive species, and their presence in a detention basin doesn't really bother the Conservation Commission unless they are interrupting or blocking the outlet. I haven't had a chance to circle back with the DPW director. I know he's been busy with some other things, but when I did speak to him, he did express not a lot of concern about cattail vegetation, and he actually was concerned about removing it and the impact it would have on needing to reshape and rebed the bottom of the basin. And as I mentioned at the last meeting, in the Stormwater Committee's annual BMP inspections, our consultant did review the library detention basin. He said it looks good and needs some minor maintenance. My stops there, there's one or two woody bushes growing on the upper rim. They are probably, if they're an inch in diameter, that's probably generous. So I expect that I'll follow up with the DPW director, but I expect those to be taken care of pretty readily.
All right, great. Well, thank you for following up on it. I would like to find out what those recommendations were and make sure that those actually happen. Those minor maintenance recommendations, because unfortunately, if you leave those minor maintenance recommendations for too long, they become major.
Yes, and I will say that this will be the first construction season that Rob is on board with the town. So it'll be the first time he's gone through the BMP inspections and being responsible for being responsive to them. So I will bring that up to him, but I expect that shouldn't be an issue.
Now, also, Adam, you mentioned turn of the century. Was it 98 or earlier?
No.
No, so it's since 98. So it's since we had the Stormwater Handbook, which was a guidance, but it was state issue.
Yeah, I think it was 2003 was the date on the report.
So there should have been an operation and maintenance plan.
I was just going to say, then why isn't there an operation and maintenance manual?
Exactly. Can we find that out? Does it matter?
No, we can't. I mean, it was 18 years ago. It was a completely different board, a completely different director. I expect that it was one of those things where the town was building a building and everyone went, new library, and just kind of rolled with it. Again, that's all speculation on my part. I don't expect that the minutes are going to outline why they did or what they did. If it were a year ago, then I would say, hey, it's my fault. We can look at why that is, but it isn't and it wasn't. And I don't know that there's any real way to get clarity on what led up to that.
I'll keep my speculations to myself tonight.
And then the final item I have is the letter that you all have in your packet. We have discussed.
Yeah, I think this is long since past due, I think. I did read it. I like it.
Yeah, I thought it was very well written.
Yep.
I think it's very clear.
I agree. Well written, and I think it is to the point, and hopefully we get a response.
I will send it out tomorrow, both certified and regular, in hopes that something elicits something.
If we don't get a response, then I think we have to move forward with finding out what our other options are. But
I would agree with
that. Hopefully we get a response. And
would that require the secret undercover thing after the meeting thing, whatever those were called? I forget.
Executive session.
Yeah, that.
You know what? Let's send a letter and then we can consult with council if there's something further that we would need to do.
Okay. Very good. I think this has been very well handled. Thank you, everyone.
Mr. Chair, before we leave director's items, could we go back to town meeting follow-up for one moment?
Sure.
If you will forgive I will not make it a diatribe. I will limit it. good golly, do I find it frustrating. And I am very glad, by the way, first of all, that the town saw fit to pass the parking regulations that we put forward. I'm very grateful to the town for understanding that we put a lot of effort into trying to not overregulate and trying to be sensitive to businesses' needs, and that we were trying to model what's good for Lunenburg. I know I've only been on the board for a year, but good golly, am I dang frustrated that the select board chose, that members of the select board chose to vote against it without any comment of any in any way, so that we were stuck with no idea what their opinion was or why they were thinking it. It was just, any comments? No. What does, we present, what does the select board think? No, with some yeses. So nothing really pertinent to this, but I have to get that out of my system because I found that offensive, to be perfectly frank. I'm okay with being disagreed with, but they should actually at least have the decency to communicate that in front of people so we can have discussion rather than just a blanket no without further, anything else. Okay, it was more diatribe than I thought, but there we go.
That's quite all right. You're going to have to get used to that because it's not uncommon.
I've picked up on that.
They've thrown stuff in our laps and then disagreed with the way we did it and then voted against it. Like, what? Really? Yeah. So
I just didn't want where we are in a public meeting. I didn't want the opportunity to pass by for that not to be out there in the wild. That was not town government working together. I don't know what you call that. And again, I'm not trying to imply that I feel the select board should rubber stamp everything we say, because government should be a discussion. But that means it should be a discussion.
Right. Consensus.
Yes.
Right? Either you agree to disagree, or you just don't agree. You don't just but some people do. Yeah. So anything else before we go on the meeting schedule?
My spleen has been vented.
Excellent. You'll last a little bit longer that way if you do that regular. So we meet at 6:30 p.m. remote participation until further notice. We have May 15, May 24, June 14, and June 28.
Mr. Chair, we don't have May 15th. That is town election.
Oh, so you say. You are right. We don't have.
Please go out and vote.
Want to meet Saturday? All right, so we have 3, and we have 3 public hearings on 2 of them. I don't know of anything that we have on the 28th.
We have both the subdivision and 711 Mass Ave on the 28th.
Oh, they wanted the 28th and not the 14th.
Yes.
Okay.
North End is on the 14th.
Yeah. All right. So we'll have a discussion about 2-family dwellings on the May 24th.
That's correct.
Are we just discussing that, or are we expecting to discuss something that Mr. Mackey is presenting? And does he know that if that's the case?
I think he's still showing up on my screen.
I'm still here.
Excellent. Thank you for your patience again. So yeah, hopefully you'll have something submitted to us.
Yeah, I can submit a PowerPoint. Is that okay?
Sure. So May 24th, so that's 2 weks. So you got a week? Can you do that within a week?
Sure.
If you can get me material by the 18th, I can get it distributed to the board, and they'll have the chance to see it before the discussion.
Okay, I can do that. Thank you.
That would be great. Also, since I mentioned him and the issue, we haven't brought it up since. Can you reach out to Damon and see if he's got a similar something around?
Yeah, he said he'd like to come over the summer.
Oh, so he's not in a rush?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's gonna be fall anyway.
Okay.
I can reach out to him if you'd like.
Well, just so he's aware that we'd be looking for something, you know, a little more formal than just a hi, how you doing? I'd like this.
Yep.
All right, and our ongoing item seems to be empty.
They're all on the agenda.
All right. So it didn't even seem like that long of an agenda, but we are roundabout back to public comment. Public comment.
This Dave Mackey, I just wanted to second what Mr. Brenner said was, I did find it odd that the selectmen just voted no without any explanation. I would have appreciated at least knowing what the objection was, but here and there or there, it's already done. So
Excellent, thank you. And also, I don't know that we got Mr. Mackey's address for Marjorie's minutes.
we did at the beginning, 384 Townsend Harbor Road.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, I saw her today and she asked me to make sure I did that. So it's fresh in my mind. Don't worry, Marjorie, I'll forget again. So board comments or concerns? Nothing. Tanner's been, I'm sorry?
I said, I don't have any, just ready to go to bed, just ready to go to bed.
Well, then I guess you'd be willing to make our motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I would second that.
Excellent. Any further discussion about adjourning? Okay, all in favor for adjournment, roll call vote. Mr. Brenner?
Aye.
Mrs. Bertram?
Aye.
Mr. Cole?
Aye.
And an aye for myself. Thank you all very much and for a very productive meeting.
You all have a good
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.